The only way for all of us, for Palestinians. Palestinians want to have a Palestinian state and their identity. Yes, most of them, 75, 80% of them, they want to see it as a democratic state. But they do not want to lose their identity, their symbols, their language,
we're almost
their
out of time,
culture.
Mr. Ayalon. I need to ask you one more basic question. Right now, the state of Israel is not listening to voices like yours. Do you believe that your own country right now is on a pathway to potential self-destruction if it continues on the path it's on right now?
If it continues on the path, yes.
Amit Ayalon, I thank you for joining me on Hard Talk. Thanks.
Thank you.
That was Hard Talk. I'm Saroja Coelho. You're listening to CBC Radio 1. Have a great day.
Good morning, Manitoba, and hello, Winnipeg. I'm Marcy Marcusa, and this is Information Radio. Thanks so much for joining us on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or YouTube. 3 minutes to 6 o'clock, and we're on air with you till 8:37 a.m. Another rainy start to the day here. In Winnipeg today, our high is going to be 11, and a few showers that we have right now should end this afternoon, and then it'll cloud over and a low of 3. Tomorrow morning, it should start to clear for us after a couple of cloudy, rainy days here. Let's say good morning to the team. Good morning behind the glass to Brad Lillies, to Corey Funk, who's directing the show and covering the commute, and to Abby Adeyemi, who's our technical producer and will be covering weather on air with us. Heather Wells is in also this morning from our news center, and she's here now with headlines.
Good morning. Well, a Winnipeg homeowner has been fined after failing to get a permit for a garage that is twice the size as of most houses. But the city's appeals committee is still letting that big garage stay standing, and that makes the man's next door neighbor unhappy. He says this decision sets a precedent. People can just pay a fine and skirt the law. So we'll hear more about that through the morning. As well, a library hub that refers users to social services has seen a surge in visits. A new report shows the community connection space in the Millennium Library has referred nearly 5,900 people in the past 3 months. We'll hear about that coming up at 6:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Well, we're going to open the phone lines on that permit story for sure, because we're curious whether or not you've ever gone for a permit for the city and what your experience has been with getting something approved or denied, and how you feel about this story in that context of that. So we'll open up the phone lines through the show, 788-3205. Otherwise, on the program this morning, in the first hour of the show, what kind of fresh fruits and veggies are you reaching for at the supermarket? A professor at Carleton University says opting for the ugly produce can seriously cut back on food waste and on your grocery bill. It's not a new idea, but we're going to hear about a recent study he did with around marketing around this. So stay tuned for that. In addition, in this morning's program, we're going to be talking with our mental health columnist, Mark Hennick, about the idea of compassion. Can you actually define it? What compassion is, how it happens? He says we need more of it. We'll find out more ahead of Mental Health Week next week. It is also World Press Freedom Day, and today we'll talk about the 50th anniversary of the Fifth Estate. Stay tuned.
On Cue with Tom Power. Dua Lipa is one of the world's great pop stars. In a Canadian exclusive, we met up in New York City to talk about how being the child of refugees shapes her art, why pop music doesn't get the respect it deserves, and how to turn a bad date into a great song.
I feel good and I want to grasp that energy.
That's coming up on Cue, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm John Northcott. We begin in Ottawa. The public inquiry into foreign election meddling releases its first report today. This phase specifically looks at interference in the last 2 federal elections. It's based on 2 weeks of testimony from national security advisors and political parties. Janice McGregor has been following all of it for us. She is in our parliamentary bureau. Janice, what are the key points that you're watching for today?
John, if there's one key takeaway here, it's that intelligence assessments are subjective. It is not evidence, as the head of CSIS made clear to us. So when Commissioner Marie-Josée Ugg weighs in on what she's seen here today, and remember, she's had access to classified information that the rest of us couldn't see, will she land in the same place as Special Rapporteur David Johnston did and conclude that the attempts by foreign actors to meddle in the last two elections weren't actually as threatening as some media reports portrayed? Or will she agree with what opposition politicians and diaspora groups have argued, that their concerns about interference weren't taken seriously enough by intelligence agencies, and the threshold that senior public servants set for sounding the alarm was way too high, should have taken local riding-level meddling more seriously and not required definitive proof before intervening?
Janice, this is one of 3 reports on foreign interference to be released. The government has seen them all, so what's the next move?
Yeah, that's right. The Special Committee of Parliamentarians that review national security, as well as the Intelligence Review Agency, have all weighed in on foreign interference threats. Commissioner Ugg isn't required to make recommendations at this stage, but earlier this week, Public Safety Minister Dominic LeBlanc suggested the government won't wait now for her final report at the end of the year before it makes long-awaited changes to the CSIS Act, for example.
I'm confident that the Foreign Influence Registry will be part of a broader effort to strengthen legislation. I know it's very exciting. It's coming soon.
Another election, though, with more foreign meddling threats potentially, could be coming soon too, which gives today a sense of urgency.
Janice McGregor in Ottawa. Thanks, Janice.
You're welcome.
Campus demonstrations in support of Palestinians in Gaza are gaining momentum in Canada. Hundreds of people set up tents on the main university campus lawn at the University of Toronto. The demonstrators were originally warned they would have to leave by 10 p.m. last night, but just before that deadline, university officials issued a statement telling protesters they could stay for now as long as their activities remain peaceful. Similar protests have sprung up at many other schools, among them Montreal's McGill University, the University of Ottawa, and UBC in Vancouver. Demonstrators are demanding the universities pull their endowment funds out of any investments that benefit Israel. In the U.S., more than 2,000 people have now been arrested across dozens of college campuses in recent weeks, and pro-Palestinian demonstrators are remaining defiant. Police used force to remove the encampment at UCLA early yesterday. University officials say the campus will remain closed except for some limited operations. Lindsay Duncombe has more from Los Angeles.
Students at UCLA will take classes virtually today, and those who do come to campus can expect to see police. Officers remain to prevent pro-Palestinian protesters from returning and setting up a new encampment. That's happened on other campuses. And the arrests do seem to have strengthened some protesters' resolve to keep fighting. One university senior spoke to reporters while she was in custody.
It's not about me, it's about everybody. You know, if I'm free, then what does that mean if my brothers and sisters in Palestine aren't free? So we need to resist, and we need to keep protesting, and that's the only way change will be made.
Some are glad to see the barricades gone. Jeff Winnico lives nearby. He's a retired judge and Jewish.
I can understand and appreciate how hostile an environment it is for the Jewish students on campus. It's a generation that can understand microaggression, but for a Jewish student, there are some signs that they had on here in Arabic calling for the burning of Tel Aviv. It doesn't make the students feel comfortable.
In a statement, UCLA's chancellor defended the decision to clear the encampment, saying it led to unsafe conditions on campus. He said the community is in great pain. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Los Angeles.
Meanwhile, Turkey has suspended all of its trade with Israel over the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. The trade ministry in Ankara says imports and exports between the two countries will resume only when Israel allows an uninterrupted and sufficient flow of aid into Gaza. In response, Israel's foreign minister is accusing Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan of, quote, acting like a dictator. Last year, trade between Israel and Turkey amounted to some $7 billion. Secret recordings and Hollywood scandals dominated the latest testimony at Donald Trump's hush money trial. The former president is facing dozens of charges over a $130,000 payment to porn star Stormy Daniels. The CBC's Richard Madden is following the proceedings in our Washington bureau. Richard, it got a little tense in the courtroom on Thursday. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, it started when Trump's defense lawyers cross-examined a lawyer named Keith Davidson. Now, he negotiated that infamous hush money deal with former adult film star Stormy Daniels, who allegedly threatened to go public with stories of an affair with Trump before the 2016 election. Now, the defense tried to cast him as a sleazy Hollywood profiteer who tried to shake down celebrities for money, including Trump, Charlie Sheen, Hulk Hogan, and Lindsay Lohan. Now, Davidson denied accusations of extortion, saying he dealt solely with Trump's former lawyer and fixer, Michael Cohen, to broker those payments to Stormy Daniels. Now, Trump's defense team is trying to discredit Davidson's credibility and portray Michael Cohen as a disgruntled former employee. Now, the former president's accused of falsifying documents to disguise those payments, and Cohen has since been criticizing Trump online. Outside the courtroom, though, Trump complained he can't defend himself against Cohen, blaming the judge's gag order against him.
I'm not allowed to talk. There's never been any abuse like this before. This conflicted judge ought to get out of this case. He gives us nothing. It's such a rigged court.
Trump has called Cohen a liar, which violates the gag order. Prosecutors are looking for more fines against him.
So, Richard, what are you watching for next?
Yeah, well, court resumes later today, and the judge could also rule on whether Trump violated that gag order again for lashing out against a witness. But prosecutors are not yet asking to jail Trump, citing it would slow down the trial.
CBC's Richard Madden in Washington. Thanks, Richard.
Thanks.
Canada's top military commander says he's getting mixed messages from his civilian bosses in Ottawa. It has to do with military funding. General Wayne Eyre held a remote town hall with rank and file last week, and now CBC News has obtained a recording of that meeting. The CBC's Murray Brewster has more.
We're being asked to suck and blow at the same time.
A very blunt assessment from General Wayne Eyre, the country's top military commander. Last fall, the Federal Treasury Board mandated each department make internal cuts. $810 million last year and $850 million this year at defense alone. Both the new defense policy and the recent federal budget promise increased defense spending. $8.1 billion in the coming years, a lot of it aimed at future years. Confused? You're not alone.
We have more funding in the future. This year on the operations and maintenance side, we are facing some challenges. And you talk about confusion. I don't have complete clarity yet either.
It is Eyre's reference to operations and maintenance funding that stands out. The recent federal budget does earmark significant funds for maintaining old equipment, but precisely how that squares with the savings exercise is vexing finance staff. Defense Minister Bill Blair has repeatedly said internal reallocation will not affect readiness of the forces, but acknowledged getting money for defense is an uphill battle.
Trying to go to Cabinet or even to Canadians and tell them that we had to do this because we had to meet this magical threshold at 2% for the NATO commitment. And don't get me wrong, it's important. But it was really hard to convince people that that was a worthy goal.
The Defense Department hopes to have its budget sorted out sometime early this month. Murray Brewster, CBC News, Ottawa.
And finally.
Don't need to rush. We got time in our cups.
Congratulations to Neon Dreams for taking home the Album of the Year accolade at this year's East Coast Music Awards. The Halifax alt-pop duo came out on top for their release, Love Child Baby Dolphin. It was also a big night for PEI's The East Pointers, who won Group Recording of the Year for their EP, Safe in Sound, and for singer-songwriter Jen Grant, who was awarded Songwriter of the Year. This year's ceremony took place in Charlottetown. And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm John Northcott. This is CBC News.
Good morning, Manitoba, and hello, Winnipeg. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio, and we've got some light rain in parts of the city this morning. It's 7 degrees in Winnipeg. Thanks so much for joining us. This hour on the program, we have our mental health column. Next week is actually a mental health week, a moment for us to all think about what's in our best interest. Today, we're going to talk about compassion. What is it? How does it happen? And why we need more of it. So stay tuned. That's just before 7 o'clock. Also this hour, we're going to hear from the Winnipeg Police Service about a new podcast that promises to take listeners behind the headlines. But is it the police's job to make podcasts? Why have they gotten into this? We'll hear more about it. And what kinds of fresh fruits and veggies are you reaching for at the supermarket? We're going to hear from a professor who says that opting for the ugly produce can cut back on food waste and your grocery bill. With other stories and headlines, here now is Heather Wells.
Good morning. A Winnipeg man who complained about his neighbor's oversized garage is not happy with the city's appeals committee. That committee fined the homeowner who built a 4,900-foot garage without a permit, but it's still allowing that unapproved structure to stay standing. Darren Van Winsberg lives next door. We're going to hear his beef coming up in our next news. And the Winnipeg Fire Paramedic Service says it cannot meet a city's budget target unless it cuts back on services when it's short-staffed. The department, in a new report, says the only way to hit a $3 million savings goal for this year is if it cuts overtime. We'll hear more coming up in our next local news at 6:30.
So full disclosure, at 6 o'clock when World Report was on, Heather and I were looking up quotes from The Simpsons, from Selma and Patty, Marge's sisters.
Because you sound a little like them.
I do.
I know it's not nice to laugh at someone who's struggling with a throat issue, but
actually, I've looked up now. I thought I'd celebrate it, so I've looked up the famous quotes. I've got some of them. When are you going to wake up and smell your husband, Marge? Like I actually could do some great VO work today.
That's perfect.
If someone wants me.
I'm half expecting you to sit us down and make us watch your old vacation. I think that's a classic.
Have a seat, Corey. I got a thing to show you. Right? I know. It's crazy. It's bizarre. Anyway, my cold just hanging on here. It's been a whopper of an illness, I tell you. All right, let's get on with it here. Let's get into what's happening in our forecast, and we'll get to Corey in the commute in a moment. First, Abby Adiyemi, good morning.
Yeah, good morning to you. I know with the weather changing all and this rain with the dust all being puffed up, a lot of allergies will be triggering, and definitely this would be a sign for some people to seek medical attention. Yesterday actually saw soaking rain across southern Manitoba, and even a little bit of snow in the northern part of the province. Basically now all of southern Manitoba is seeing light rain, and the northern part, some areas seeing light snow and fog patches. But currently in Winnipeg, it is 7 degrees. We have light rain in our city. So if you're heading out or getting set, if you're going to be making that transition from one bus to another, don't forget the umbrella or the raincoat, okay? So you get that prepared. We are at 7 degrees. Today's forecast calls for a few showers, which will be tapering off late in the afternoon, leaving us with cloudy skies, and we're expecting highs around 11 degrees. And as we move into tonight, the clouds are going to stick around, keeping things mainly cloudy, and the temperatures will be dipping down to around +3. So the nights, if you have plans for Friday night out, you might want to stay cozy. Brandon is saying current similar conditions as Winnipeg at 6 degrees. Thompson is cloudy, chance of rain later at 0. Churchill is seeing some mist and light snow at the moment, and then fog patches clearing up. Duffin is at 6 with light snow. Gimli is at 7 with light rain. Gimli is at 7 with light rain. Steinbach seeing showers and some thunderstorm for Steinbach and Morris, so possibilities of that. You need to prepare yourself for that. But for Winnipeg, it's going to be more of like rain today, followed by clouds in the night, and then Saturday is more brighter.
All right, thank you, Abby.
You're welcome.
Corey, what is up on the commute?
Yeah, right now, very quiet, pretty straightforward. Haven't heard anything going on yet. Pretty wet out there. You're going to want a fender if you're on your bike. If you see something going on, though, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number, 204-788-3093.
Well, up first this half hour, the Winnipeg Police Service is trying out a new way of sharing information with the public.
Welcome to WPS After Hours Podcast, a presentation of the Public Information Office. We take you beyond the headlines to get the story behind the stories on the issues that impact you. In today's episode,
That's part of the opening to a new podcast called WPS After Hours. It was created by the WPS Public Information Office, as you heard, and the first episode about grandparent scams was released in March. Now, the latest episode is about the Alternative Response to Citizens in Crisis program, or ARC, which was released earlier this month. Constable Danny McKinnon is a public information officer with the Winnipeg Police Service and one of the hosts of the WPS After Hours podcast. She spoke about it with guest host Chloe Friesen yesterday on Up to Speed.
It's probably been a year in the making, thinking about it. January is when we really hit the ground running and got our first interviews set up. We wanted to align our opening podcast to be in March because it was Fraud Prevention Month, and that grandparent scam interview was perfect.
How do you feel about the response it's been getting so far?
Well, if we're looking at audience engagement, we're just starting. So, we're slow to start. Hopefully this will help a little bit. It's going to take a little bit of time to get bigger, but I will say that anybody who goes onto our Winnipeg Police public-facing website, it's on the first homepage, so hopefully that'll attract a little bit more attention too.
What's the purpose of having this podcast?
Yeah, there's a few different purposes to it. It's certainly an extension of what we already do, and that's generate concepts and provide news to the public. But this isn't a little bit, it's not as formal. So we wanted to have a more relaxed format to provide that information to the public. We say it in the opening. We want to go behind the headlines, go beyond them, and tell the stories behind the stories. We have so many different units in the service that the public doesn't know about, that the jobs that they do. Really proud of the work that's done, and we wanted to tell some of those personal stories and how they affect the public.
Some people might wonder if a podcast made by police is necessary. What would you say to the folks who might ask if it's the police's job to make podcasts?
Well, I think it is. We're the Public Information Office. We have to stay with the times. There's many people in the community that don't follow traditional media. They're not reading the newspapers. They don't watch the news. They get their info online. And so the podcast is another way, although it's not daily news every day, it certainly hits on some very pertinent topics that impact our community.
How much does the podcast cost the Winnipeg Police Service?
$400. We have 4 microphones and is a total of $400. And all of the production is done in-house. We have an absolutely top-notch video production unit and our communications coordinator.
And that video production unit is already existing within?
Oh, yes,
okay.
Yes. So the Public Information Office is sort of a two-pronged unit because we have what we do, press conferences, writing the media releases, where the police officers, myself, Jason Mikulish, and Claude Chansey are all constables who do that work. And then we have a video production unit, and they do a lot of in-house work and source out external videos and whatnot, but they've helped just craft a wonderful podcast.
In the intro to the podcast, you talk about going beyond the headlines. Is there any concern about traditional news media not representing police-related stories fairly?
No, I don't think one begets the other. This, like we said, this is an extension. It's another avenue to get information. This is not daily news because we're only putting an episode out approximately. Our goal is once a month. The daily news still will come in the format of media releases, press conferences, and interviews that we do with media such as yourself through email and video and radio.
No, police-run podcasts, they've been in the news for various reasons. There was a CBC investigation last year that found Toronto police spent more than $300,000 worth of taxpayer money on a similar style of podcast with a limited audience. And in Saskatoon, a police-made podcast created this year is raising questions about transparency and how authorities share data. How do you respond to some of the critics of other police-made podcasts? Is the WPS doing anything different than Toronto and Saskatoon?
Well, we're certainly aware of the other services who do the podcasts. I mean, I feel like it's pretty common throughout North America for many law enforcement agencies to have taken on a podcast format. So I don't think that's really unique. Like I said, we're not doing it as daily news. So in terms of sharing statistics and whatnot, although it may be part of a presentation we're doing, we're not relying on the podcast to provide that information to the public. It's only to enhance the information and talk about some units, some stories that we wouldn't normally talk about because we're so focused on what we have to do. Our main goal in the Public Information Office is sharing that information.
I want to talk about the latest episode, which is about some of the mental health calls that Winnipeg police get. And there's been some high-profile cases in the news this year, cases that are before the IIU. Are there any concerns about having these conversations when some of the cases are being investigated by independent bodies?
No. So what I'll say about that is, although they are under investigations, there's a couple investigations with IIU. The podcast was being sourced before that. And these are very important conversations that we have to talk. We're talking about mental health every day in all aspects of the media, with the police, within our community, how we're all touched by different cases of mental health and the impacts that it has. And so now more than ever, it's very important to talk about our ARC unit, which is alternative response to citizens in crisis, and how our service has another option collaborating with Shared Health to work through some of these situations.
So that's Constable Danny McKinnon, a public information officer with the Winnipeg Police Service, speaking out about their new podcast in conversation with guest host Chloe Friesen on Up to Speed yesterday. The podcast is called WPS After Hours.
On the topics that matter, your voice should be heard.
I'm really concerned.
And I'm not really happy about that.
Radio Noon is where you can voice your take. I'm Janet Stewart. From 12:30 to 1 p.m., Radio Noon opens the phone lines on one important topic.
It just brings everyone together.
Radio Noon's call-in segment, 204-780-0893. We want to hear from you, weekdays on CBC.
6:23 a.m. is the time right now. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thanks so much for joining us on Information Radio, 89.3, 990 a.m. on the app or YouTube. Great to be back with you. Thanks to Faith Fundell, who's been filling in for me the last couple of mornings as I've been struggling with a bit of sickness here. Still hanging on. I should be singing Bonnie Tyler songs through the morning. Light rain and 7 degrees in the city of Winnipeg this morning. It's also raining over in Brandon. It's 6 degrees there. Up in Thompson's mostly cloudy and 0. Now, for Winnipeg, a few showers that we're getting now should end late this afternoon, and then our high 11 degrees. Mainly cloudy into tonight, and then tomorrow it should clear in a high of 13. The showers in Brandon will last a little longer. You're expecting 5 to 10 millimeters of rain, so more significant than here in Winnipeg, and your high in Brandon is 10 degrees. Right now in Winnipeg, 7, in Brandon, 6 degrees with the rain. Well, next on the show, many people in Canada continue to struggle with the cost of food. At the same time, supermarkets can be choosy when it comes to standards for fresh produce, limiting what's on offer. For instance, some fruits and vegetables are rejected for cosmetic reasons as ugly produce because of variations in weight, size, or shape. It means a large amount of food that's grown for consumption never gets to our tables, and it can end up in the landfill. Our next guest is Aaron Darmody. He's an associate professor of marketing at Carleton University, and he's challenging his students to opt for imperfect produce as part of a recent study. Good morning.
Good morning, Marcy.
So tell us about this study you did.
Okay, so as part of an exercise with my students, what I gave them was what I call an experiential learning exercise. So in this, they were instructed to shop for imperfect food. The purpose was to make a salad. But what it meant was actively planning, shopping for, preparing a salad with food issues in mind. And they were doing so in quite an intentional way. So they were sort of being very mindful of sort of how they were consuming, what they were consuming, why they were doing things. And it started with me sort of giving them some details, readings, lectures and so forth about imperfect food, about ugly produce, about the scale of this waste, the kind of many wider effects in terms of land energy and so forth that gets wasted when this food does. And sort of just putting them in the position as consumers then to try and consume or shop for this food, use this food, and then just reflect on kind of what they were doing. The intention was to sort of then build sort of a a pedagogical exercise, let's say, that can be used in classes by others to sort of engage students on this particular issue.
What was their feedback from the students?
The feedback was good. Well, they liked the topic to begin with. It was on sustainable issues. It was an experiential sort of learning exercise. It wasn't just this thing where they kind of passively learned, but it was also sort of quite tricky and enlightening for them. Well, they were sort of surprised by the scale of this issue when it was first introduced to them. They were sort of interested in the way that sort of we've been conditioned to expect certain produce and certain sort of standards, but also the way in which that, when we're sort of dealing with kind of a larger food system, how a lot of this stuff never gets to the table or never gets to the retailers in the first place. One of the things they found was actually quite difficult to find some of these foods, unless you're growing it yourself, unless you're going to a farmer's market. You tend to get presented in many of the larger retail stores. It tends to be sort of quite uniform.
I was gonna say, how lucky were they in finding sort of the two-headed carrot or the twisty cucumber and all that stuff? Can you quantify how much ugly produce has contributed to the situation with food waste? I mean, how big of a problem is this?
There's a range of statistics. Typically, I'd say if you sort of averaging them out, it tends to say like about a third of food tends to get lost or wasted. This is sort of kind of a UN report. In the US, that's sort of often estimated even higher, at about 40%. Canada, we sort of tend to fall into like around the kind of 30% range from the numbers I've seen, but it's hard to sort of point to one figure to say, look, this is exactly the number, this is exactly the amount that gets wasted. And then there are kind of other reasons beyond just sort of imperfect produce. If you're dealing with fresh food and you're dealing with sort of a multi-level system and so forth. But yeah, there's a range of different ways it's sort of captured. It's said, let's say, if food waste was a country, it would be the third biggest emitter of greenhouse gases. So that's kind of just one of the ways to sort of kind of capture the size and scale. That was kind of what motivated this topic.
What's behind why we do it? Why do you think we tend to reach for cosmetically appealing produce first?
Yeah, that is a tough one. So we're sort of conditioned in many respects to, your tomatoes, you're expecting them to be a certain shade of red, certain color, certain texture and so forth. And if things tend to sort of fall below those standards, you often might assume that they're less fresh, kind of less high quality. And there is that sort of association we do often have with these sort of more kind of perfect, if that's the word I want to use, looking food, sort of more this uniform, more symmetrical, that it does tend to suggest quality, it does tend to suggest freshness to us. And whether that's sort of based on conditioning or whether that's just based on the way in which we sort of react to how things look generally, that's kind of a harder one to sort of pinpoint to say there's exactly kind of one reason. But then if we're never getting exposed to it, or we're very rarely getting exposed to it, then it sort of just gets perpetuated that we expect certain things, and therefore if it doesn't look right in quote unquote, then, it sort of stands out more.
Overall, I know we've done some stories in Manitoba about the ugly food movement, and some sort of smaller local grocers and markets have sort of put bags together to sell the ugly fruits and vegetables at a discount. But what have you noticed about companies doing things to counter the situation?
Well, yeah, that is sort of one of the kind of like the bright spots, as you're saying, whether it's just companies like you were saying, packaging them and sort of selling them sort of specifically sort of labeled this way. So the best success story is a US one, and it's a company called Misfits Market, which has been running for a number of years. And essentially what you're doing is you're getting your food boxes delivered to your home, often with ugly produce. Misfits Market, you can sort of see in the name kind of what they're doing. And that's a company that's sort of now worth $1 billion plus. In Canada, there's companies kind of like Odd Bunch, Spud.ca, Eat Impact, and so forth that have kind of taken that sort of same business model and are trying to do that. They're not quite doing it on the scale that you're finding in the U.S. And a lot of the times they're partnering directly with farms, with farmers, sort of being the, being sort of like, the direct line from kind of like the farmer to the
table,
to the customer. Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you very much for the conversation. I appreciate your time today.
No, I appreciate it, Marcy. Take care. Thanks.
Thank you. That's Aaron Darmody, an associate professor of marketing at Carleton University. He is in Ottawa. Your CBC Winnipeg News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, we've got some light drizzle at 7 degrees. These showers ending late this afternoon. A high today of 11, sunny and warmer for the weekend. A Winnipeg homeowner has been fined after failing to get a permit for a garage that is twice the size of most houses. But the city's appeals committee is still allowing that 4,900 square foot structure to stay standing. Planning consultant John Winthrop says his client was fined a few $1,000s. He says the garage is one of many detached structures on the sprawling lots in Wilkes South area of Charleswood.
This property is the size of a CFL football field, and we're putting a barn on it essentially. In that entire area, there is a large number of structures, such as for horses, rings, etc., where people keep even livestock.
Winthrop says his client didn't know he needed a permit to build that garage. The man's next-door neighbor says the decision sets a precedent that people can just pay a fine and get away with skirting the law. The Winnipeg Fire Paramedic Service says it can't meet a city budget target unless it cuts back on services when it's short-staffed. The department says in a new report the only way to hit a $3 million savings goal for this year is if it cuts overtime. That would mean reducing the number of fire trucks in service when there aren't enough firefighters on shift. Councillor Evan Duncan thinks they may not hit that cost-cutting target.
We're not taking firefighters off the streets of Winnipeg. That is not the goal here. This was an ask in the budget process. Obviously, there needs to be more homework done on how we can find those monies because it can't come from the front line.
The Winnipeg Fire Paramedic Service says shortages of more than 16 staff would still require overtime to avoid safety issues. The report goes to a city committee next week. A judge is expected to decide today whether the trial of a Winnipeg man accused of killing 4 women will be heard by a jury. Lawyers for Jeremy Skibicki have asked his trial be heard by judge alone. The defense says 2 years of publicity around the case may have biased the jurors. Skibicki has pleaded not guilty to 4 counts of first-degree murder in the deaths of Rebecca Contois, Morgan Harris, Mercedes Myron, and a 4th unidentified woman Indigenous leaders have named Buffalo Woman. Skibicki's lawyers say they also plan to argue he is not criminally responsible for the deaths because of mental illness. Opening arguments are set to be heard next Wednesday. An advocate says a surge in referrals from a social services hub at the Millennium Library shows the need for that space. A new report shows referrals from Community Connections more than doubled in the last 3 months compared to the 3 previous months. Funding for the hub is set to run out at the end of the year. Joe Kernow of the group Millennium for All says that would be a huge mistake.
We know that the library is home to a lot of different users with different needs, and that Community Connections provides library services designed by library professionals to provide library resources. And so why this would be outside the scope of what the city should fund is a mystery to me.
Councillor Evan Duncan, chair of the Community Services Committee, says the province should step in and fund the Community Connections space. To the pro-Palestinian protest movement now. That encampment at the University of Toronto went up yesterday, with the school issuing a statement demanding the demonstrators disperse by 10 last night. However, the U of T went on to say if the protest activities remain peaceful, no action would be taken. It's one of a number of encampments at universities across the country, including McGill in Montreal, the University of Ottawa, and the UBC campus in Vancouver. Canada's first Arctic and offshore patrol vessel, HMCS Max Bernay, is officially being welcomed today into the Pacific Fleet. Princess Anne, the sister of King Charles, is taking part in its commissioning ceremony in North Vancouver. She is the Commodore-in-Chief for the Canadian Fleet Pacific. National Defence says the introduction of this ship will allow the Navy to meet future defence challenges in Canada's north. Well, Manitobans are having a blast competing at an international cheerleading event in Orlando. 15-year-old Gabby Boyley is part of the Central cheer team. She says even though the team didn't win their event, the group has come a long way.
When we first had our first practice, not everyone knew each other. Some were very new to level 3. Not many knew the skills. So we all really just came together as a team and pushed our absolute hardest. So being here today with a lot of girls who haven't even competed at this level is very surreal.
The president of Cheer Manitoba says this is the biggest team Manitoba has ever sent to this event. You can find more Manitoba news. All you have to do is head to our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Heather Marge could have been a great cheerleader, but she married Homer. I promise I'll let this bit go. In a bit.
Keep it up. I love
it. Thank you.
You're pretty amazing. I want to hear more.
We're mimicking.
Which one was that, Selma or
Patty? Oh, gosh. Do they sound different?
No, I don't think so.
All right. Heather Wells from our news department this morning at 6:36 a.m. Great to be back with you on Information Radio. It's time for our regional forecast now with Abby Adiyemi.
Good morning once again. Let's look at what the weather looks like across the region. Here in Winnipeg, it's currently 7 degrees. We're seeing some light rain, so you might want to prepare for that throughout the day. We're going to be expecting a few showers to stay with us, gradually tapering off in the afternoon and leaving us with mostly cloudy skies, and we'll see a high of 11 later. Tonight, the clouds will linger on and then temperatures will be dropping to around 3 degrees. But if we head to Brandon, we're seeing similar temps. It's at 6 degrees and light rain also. The showers are forecasted to stay longer, and we'll be seeing around 5 to 10 millimeters of rain in Brandon today and a high of 10 degrees. In Thompson, it's 0 and cloudy, a chance of rain in the afternoon and a high of 7. Further north in Churchill, it's -1 and it's misty over there. Today, expect periods of light snow and fog patches to dissipate as the morning progresses, and we'll be getting to a high of 0. Down in Dauphin, it's 6 degrees, some light rain also, and showers expected throughout the day, high of 8. Gimli's at 7 degrees, seeing light rain at the moment, and showers forecasted with a high of 12. Steinbach is at 6 with showers, and there's a risk of thunderstorm this afternoon, a high of 12. Finally, in Morris, it is 6 degrees and also cloudy. We're expecting showers and the risk of thunderstorm in the afternoon also. And the wind will be something we need to take into consideration as it's going to be coming from the west late in the day. A high of 12 is what Morris will be getting to today. But in Winnipeg, we're expecting showers today, tapering off by an afternoon period with a high of 11. And tonight it's going to stay cloudy.
All right. Thanks, Abby.
You're welcome.
Let's get into our commute situation with Corey.
Yeah, so far it's been a pretty straightforward commute. Haven't heard much going on out there. If you're walking, biking, driving, though, and you see something going on, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number to call, 204-788-3093.
All right. Thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
Phil DeMont is here now with our business report. Good morning, Phil.
Hi, Marcy.
So central banks usually try to be pretty clear about what they're thinking for interest rates, but it doesn't seem to be the case right now. So why is there confusion?
Yeah, this is interesting because both on Wall Street, Bay Street, the question in a lot of people's mind is they don't know when or if the Federal Reserve or the Bank of Canada will cut interest rates this year. At the beginning of 2024, investors were expecting both central banks to start lowering rates maybe as early as April, March, April, that kind of time frame. That's after 2 years plus of hiking them to cut inflation, cool the economy. And for a lot of bank watchers, that strategy seems to have worked. Inflation rate in Canada was close to 7% in 2022. It's under 3% now. In the U.S., it was above 8% 2 years ago. Now it's 3.5%. But interest rates haven't moved at all. Confusion in Canada is partly because our economy slowed as inflation dropped. So you'd think, okay, it's the perfect condition to start reducing rates and get the economy going again. But Tiff Macklin, Governor of the Bank of Canada, told a Commons committee this week that any reductions would be gradual and that Canadians probably will not see those ultra-low interest rates we had before the pandemic. Growing idea here that the almost 0% interest before led to the housing bubble and too much borrowing by consumers. U.S., a little different. The Federal Reserve talked about cutting rates 0.75% this year, but American economy is surprisingly strong, so the central bank appears to be backing off that. But that kind of confusions led to less business investment, especially in the U.S., than otherwise would have been the case. Number in 2024 expected to go up, but by only 3%, which is a fairly low number considering where the economy is.
To another story now, Air Canada said it lost money in the most recent quarter. So what's the problem?
Yeah, it's kind of in a strange situation because costs increased because it added planes that's flying more passengers, but it also parked other jets. So they lost $81 million in the first 3 months of the year, 4 cents a share. They made $4 million last year. The issue for Air Canada on the top line is it boosted capacity by 11%. So in other words, they're flying more people. But when you do that, it's in the short term, you drive up costs. In this case, about 6%. That's maintenance, labor costs. The jets, to get them up and going, is an expensive proposition. But they're also having to park some. They took 7 Airbus jets out of circulation because the Pratt & Whitney engines they had weren't working properly. So they're looking at those Boeing 737 MAX planes to replace these, maybe lease them. But these are the same planes that U.S. authorities want re-inspected because a section of an Alaskan Airlines plane popped off in mid-flight last winter. Also, they have a couple of freighters that they took out of the fleet. That's because passenger revenue was up in the quarter. That's a good sign. But cargo sales, that revenue line fell by more than 10%. So they had to put the planes in mothballs, at least for the short term.
And before we look at markets today, producers say it's going to cost more for people's favorite olive oil. What's happening there?
Yeah, that's because of 2 years in a row of really hot weather in Spain. Spain produces something like 40% of the world's olive oil. This is from De Leo. Now, it's the largest producer of liquid gold in that country. You might know the labels Bertelli and Carapelli. You see them on the store shelves. The CEO was talking this week about the high temperatures in Spain, creating a perfect storm for the industry. Mercury, just because I found this number, last year hit 116 degrees at one point. That's resulted in a poor olive crop. This year, producers expect to pick 766,000 tons in the current year. That's better than last year, but last year was an all-time low, and the crop this year is still less than the Spanish government was predicting. So, not surprisingly, prices soaring in January. Olive oil was going for almost $10 US a kilo. That's a record price. It's come back a little bit in recent months with cooler weather, but it's still 3 times where it was in December 2020.
What is happening in the markets then, Phil?
Right now, a little mixed. In Europe, decent gains. Germany, France, UK up close to 0.5% each. Shanghai and the Nikkei in Japan, they were down slightly. Oil up 24 cents, $79.19 US a barrel. Canadian dollar, I have it up about 1/5 of a cent, trading at 73.19 cents US.
All right, Phil, thank you very much.
Thanks, Percy.
From our business desk, that's Phil Dumont. It is 6:42 a.m. We've got a rainy spring day on our hands here. Light rain in parts of the city this morning, 7 degrees. It'll taper off, a high of 11. And then cloudy tonight in Winnipeg with a low of 3. Tomorrow clearing and a high 13. It's also light rain in Brandon, 6 degrees. You're going to get a lot more though today, 5 to 10 millimeters of showers expected. And in Thompson, it's mostly cloudy and it is 0. Your high today is going to be 7. You also have a chance of rain this afternoon, a 30% chance. Well, we're talking about the rain in springtime, which might be seasonal. Winter might be in our rear view. But there's a tune from a Manitoba-Montreal folk duo that wants to highlight the importance of the coldest season of the year. They're called Fire and Smoke, and here they are with a tune about the beauty of winter. The tune's called Lady Frost.
Massey Hall, the most iconic music venue in Canada. An absolute milestone in the careers of musicians who stand on the historic stage. And you have a front row seat. The Beaches, Charlotte Cardin, William Prince, Jeremy Dutcher, July Talk, and more. CBC Music Live at Massey Hall. Now available on CBC Jam.
Thank you, Toronto!
Can you feel the winter as it tugs upon your sleeve? The tingle of fresh powder wrapped around so lovingly. Can you see the dancers as they skate across the snow? They play the most familiar song, I've got nowhere to go. Nowhere to go. Nowhere to go. it's now come to braid my hair. See through the dark jacks come for me, and I shall be his bride. Round the wheel spins winter time, I'm never at his side. At his side. At his side. Woo-hoo. My sister, I have never looked like you, the blush of summer blooms. Whistling my tune across the panes, cast stars around the rooms. Eyes like two blue agates fixed beneath an icy stream. It's in the coldest season that the oldest wisdom gleams. And for the sake of all that lives, I pray we never meet. We must be content. I chase you, chase me around the world. We'll have our bit of fun. It's as we were when we were girls, darling. But a moment you were gone and I was lost. Fear not for me, for glad of heart I am as Lady Frost. I've put to bed what you've brought up. You've baked the bread, I've come to sup. You are the wine, I am the cup. Can you feel the wind? Can you feel the wind? Can you feel the wind?
New music from Fire and Smoke. It's called Lady Frost. You can find it on their new EP called Constance, which is out now.
There are many people who bring success, innovation, accomplishment, and charity to our community. We'd like you to help us meet some of the best. CBC Future 40 will honor 10 Manitobans under 40 making a difference. Help us discover the inspiring people in our province by nominating a shining star in your community today. For details, visit cbc.ca/future40mb.
Well, I want to mention a story that's in the news this morning that has a lot of, I think is going to have a lot of people reacting to it. It's about that garage in Winnipeg's Wilkes South neighborhood that's dividing members of City Council. The homeowner building the 4,900 square foot garage without a permit, and it's 4 times the size of what's allowed. They applied for the variance. He was turned down, still built it. And then the city decided the garage can stay. So we're wondering if you want to weigh in, because a lot of people in the city, of course, go for permitting and have different things being built in their own neighborhoods. So we're just curious. Our question that we want to ask this morning out of the story is what issues have you had trying to get permits on your property with the city? So if you want to call, if you call early, we can get calls on. So 788-3205. 788-3205 is our listener line. If you would rather write to the show, you can write to radio893 at cbc.ca. That's radio893 at cbc.ca. Well, up next on Information Radio, all next week is Mental Health Week in this country. And this morning on our mental health column, we're talking about compassion. Compassion is what happens when we feel moved by someone else's suffering. Not only moved, but when we're compelled to act. Not only does it have an impact on those who you help, it also has mental health benefits. I recently spoke about this with our mental health columnist, Mark Hennick.
Good morning.
So what do we mean when we say compassion?
Well, the etymology of compassion really comes from the Latin roots com and pati, which means to suffer together. It arises when we encounter somebody else's suffering and we feel motivated to alleviate it. And it's related to, but importantly distinct from, 2 other really common human experiences. Compassion is not quite sympathy, which is to acknowledge feelings, but sort of as an outsider, looking at somebody's suffering. It's also not empathy, though empathy does take things a step further than sympathy does. Rather than looking at another's feelings, empathy enters into the emotion and feels with the other person. But then compassion goes even further still. We notice the feeling, we share the feeling, and we're prompted to take action to help ease or improve things for the person. I spoke with Dr. Daniel Tomasulo about this recently. Dan is a longtime clinical psychologist. He's a professor at Columbia University and the best-selling author of Learned Hopefulness and the Positivity Effect. Here's what he told me.
If I feel something that moves me and then I'm compelled to act, I want to treat that person or myself, if it's self-compassion, like I would treat a best friend, then there's something about my intention. Now I want to do something.
You can get my full conversation with Dr. Tomasulo on my YouTube page, but he went on to say that to be able to act compassionately toward others, in order for this to be sustainable over time, you also have to learn to act compassionately toward yourself.
What happens in our brain and our body when we do that, when we feel compassion?
Well, why we feel compassion, it's been studied from a number of different scientific perspectives, including neuroscience, cognitive science, and social psychology. And one discovery from that body of research is the significant overlap in the neural networks for caregiving behavior, feelings of social connection, and reward circuits in the brain. And feelings of compassion involve experiences of care and closeness that are neurologically very similar to those that are invoked during feelings of love. So coordinated activation of those overlapping brain networks, it seems to have positive effects on our health and well-being by downregulating or suppressing our threat and our stress reactions. Altruism and social support, they've also been implicated in that same neural system, and that I think possibly extends compassion to social justice and our provision of social safety nets. And then another realization has been that many of the specific brain networks that are involved with compassion, they have an especially high density of receptors for neuropeptides like oxytocin, which are related to attachment. Now, I'm not going to get into the weeds of attachment theory today, but I raise this because I think it could help us to explain other findings which suggest that interpersonal problems, which are often caused by a lack of compassion, either toward others or toward ourselves, they appear to be correlated with people who have an insecure attachment style, especially people who avoid attachment. So the avoidance of close emotional involvement with others, that can lead to low compassion toward yourself and others, and that can lead to chronic emotional distress and anxiety. So compassion, therefore, I think it might actually be an evolutionary or adaptive way for us to manage those feelings of disconnection by keeping us deeply connected with other people, not just as instrumental objects in our world, but rather as people, as subjects with feelings and stories and sufferings all their own.
What does compassion look like in practice?
Well, there's some cultural differences with respect to both the inner experience and the outer expression of compassion in practice. How strongly we try to avoid feeling negative, that appears to be culturally informed. In cultures where people are more likely to avoid feeling negative, then the more they tend to focus on the positive when they're responding to somebody else's suffering, which is essentially what compassion is. So, for example, they'll be more likely to focus on comforting memories rather than on the pain of loss when supporting somebody who's mourning a death. So that's one part of how compassion toward others works in practice. But the other side of this is what compassion toward yourself looks like in practice. Let's go back to Dr. Tomasulo for that.
There's a great saying in Buddhism, if I take care of this moment, it'll take care of all the others. And I like to extend that to, if you take care of yourself in this moment, that will take care of all the others because you're constantly finding ways to take care of you.
So self-compassion in practice really is self-care. It involves accepting our imperfections, being mindful of our own emotions, and it really needs to be a consistent, responsive practice to refill our compassion reservoir, to refill our cup whenever it runs out.
So how do you do that? How do you foster more compassion?
Well, I think regular listeners have probably heard me talk a few times about the dialectical behavior therapy skill of acceptance and change. And I bring that up here because I think it's one really powerful way to practice and to foster more compassion. Compassion is a choice not to deny that suffering exists in yourself and in your world, but rather to accept that it's there, that it's real, and then we commit to do something about it, to change things for the better. We need to choose to do that non-judgmentally, and whether it's toward yourself or a complete stranger, to act as though you were doing it for your best friend. But practicing open and flexible awareness and acceptance of our present moment experience, that's a critical component, a vital first step of the change process that's required to become more compassionate.
All right, Mark, thank you for this.
Thank you.
Mark Hennick is the author of So-Called Normal, a memoir of family, depression, and resilience. He's also our mental health columnist. 3 minutes to 7 o'clock. Of course, what helps with mental health is a good laugh. And just a reminder that the Comedy Festival is on now, runs through May 5th, and there's lots going on. So you can check it all out online, Comedy Fest 2024 online. All kinds of things going on this weekend, including the tapings of the debaters here in Winnipeg. Congratulations to our winners. I know that we had announced them this week, and Dean Jenkinson was on the program in my absence, so head out and celebrate all the Canadian talents coming to town. There's really good lineups this year out there. It is 3 minutes to 7 o'clock right now. Heather Wells joins us with headlines this morning.
Good morning. Well, a Winnipeg man who complained about his neighbor's oversized garage is not happy with the city's appeals committee. That committee fined the homeowner who built a 4,900-foot garage without getting a permit, but is still allowing the unapproved structure to stay standing. Darren Van Winsberg lives next door. We're going to hear from him coming up in our next local news. As well, an advocate says a surge in referrals from a social services hub at the Millennium Library shows the need for that space. We'll hear how many referrals have been going through Community Connections coming up in our next local news at 7:30.
All right, thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
It is raining and 7 degrees in Winnipeg. Just light rain on and off, pretty light in the downtown. This will taper off for us today, and then a high of 11 degrees for the city. Mainly cloudy tonight in Winnipeg, low to 3 degrees. Tomorrow, clearing and a high of 13, and then into Sunday, sunny and 18 if the forecast holds. In Brandon, right now, light rain. You're expecting 5 to 10 millimeters today, a high of 10. Right now, it's 6 degrees. And in Thompson, currently 0, mostly cloudy. And you've got a 30% chance of seeing rain this afternoon, and a high of 7. So these cloudy spring days continue for us. In the commute this morning, it's been pretty good so far. Call us if you need us, 788-3093. Well, the next hour of Information Radio today is World Press Freedom Day. In recognition of the value of journalism in the country, we're going to focus on the CBC News investigative program, The Fifth Estate, which is about to enter its 50th year. We're also going to find out about a project that show is advancing to widen journalism. We'll find out more about it. That's coming up after 7. In addition, this weekend there's a special graduation powwow at the University of Manitoba. We're going to hear from a student who's pretty excited to be part of that. And we're going to dig into the story that Heather just mentioned about that giant garage that was built in the Wilkes area without permits. It's still standing. Just paid a fine. We want to know what your situation's been with permits and trying to get them from the city. 788-3205. World Report, though, is next.
On the Current.
Just want to make sure the Durham sergeant's aware that they're driving the opposite direction. Someone's going to get hurt.
Grandparents and an infant were among those killed after a police chase in Ontario this week that sent a van going the wrong way down a busy highway. We'll look at the rules and risks around police chases coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm John Northcott.
We begin in Toronto and the campus protests in support of Palestinians in Gaza. Demonstrations on the main campus of the University of Toronto continued into the night, despite an earlier warning from the administration that the crowd would need to leave by 10 p.m. But just before that deadline, officials changed their stance, saying the protesters would not be forced to leave as long as they remained peaceful. The administration said it would not be considered a peaceful protest if hate speech or threats were used. Hundreds of people were there, many having set up tents on a campus lawn. The U of T demonstration, just one of many taking place across Canada, including McGill University, UBC, and the University of Ottawa. Protesters are calling for the universities to pull any investments that may be linked to Israel. In the U.S., more than 2,000 people have now been arrested across dozens of college campuses in recent weeks, and pro-Palestinian demonstrators are remaining defiant. Police used force to remove the encampment from UCLA early yesterday. University officials say the campus will remain closed except for some limited operations. Lindsay Duncombe has more from Los Angeles.
Students at UCLA will take classes virtually today, and those who do come to campus can expect to see police. Officers remain to prevent pro-Palestinian protesters from returning and setting up a new encampment. That's happened on other campuses. And the arrests do seem to have strengthened some protesters' resolve to keep fighting. One university senior spoke to reporters while she was in custody.
It's not about me, it's about everybody. You know, if I'm free, then what does that mean if my brothers and sisters in Palestine aren't free? So we need to resist, and we need to keep protesting, and that's the only way change will be made.
Some are glad to see the barricades gone. Jeff Winnico lives nearby. He's a retired judge and Jewish.
I can understand and appreciate how hostile an environment it is for the Jewish students on campus. It's a generation that can understand microaggression, but for a Jewish student, there are some signs that they had on here in Arabic calling for the burning of Tel Aviv. It doesn't make the students feel comfortable.
In a statement, UCLA's chancellor defended the decision to clear the encampment, saying it led to unsafe conditions on campus. He said the community is in great pain. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Los Angeles.
Turkey is also ramping up pressure to end the war in Gaza.
Böylesine Türkiye'nin dün itibariyle
This morning, the trade minister announced Turkey will stop all trade with Israel until there is a permanent ceasefire in Gaza. That could take significant time, but there are reports that Israel and Hamas are getting closer to a temporary truce. Abby Kugadassan has the details.
For people in Gaza facing ongoing IDF bombardment, the hope of a ceasefire has evaporated after nearly 7 months of bloodshed. Sam Rose is the director of planning for the UN in the Palestinian territories.
People tell me that they've given up praying to God because even God has abandoned them. They're at their wits' end in terms of what comes next.
Hamas's leader Ismail Haniyeh says they're looking over the latest proposal with a positive spirit. The latest Israeli-approved offer includes several phases. The first would see Hamas release 33 hostages in exchange for an unknown number of Palestinian detainees in Israeli prisons. The Associated Press now says Israeli troops would withdraw from central Gaza a few weeks into the first phase, and Palestinians would be permitted to return to the north. That has been a major Hamas demand.
Israel made a significant offer in this last proposal that went forward.
Matthew Miller is a spokesperson for the U.S. State Department.
It's Hamas that is the only barrier to a ceasefire right now.
The Associated Press reports Hamas would have to agree to not rebuild its military capabilities, and the deal also includes the start of a 5-year Gaza reconstruction plan. A new United Nations report has assessed the cost of the damage in Gaza to be more than $18.5 billion US. The UN says it would take at least 16 years to rebuild homes destroyed by IDF bombardment and ground offensives. Abby Kuwadassan, CBC News, London.
China launched an unmanned moonshot this morning. The probe is aimed to land on the far side of the moon. The 53-day mission includes gathering lunar samples, which may provide information into the moon's less explored region. China's increasingly sophisticated space exploration program is now competing with the United States. It intends to put astronauts on the moon by 2030. The first report from the public inquiry into foreign interference comes out today. It's the result of weeks of hearings, testimony from national security agencies, political parties, even the Prime Minister, all aimed at getting to the bottom of how foreign actors may have influenced the last 2 federal elections and how the government responded. Rafi Boudjikanian has more.
Allegations that foreign governments are attempting to interfere have been circulating.
Justice Marie-Josée Hogg welcoming the audience to the public inquiry into foreign interference in January.
These allegations have sparked significant debate.
But it took months to spark the inquiry itself, and media reports, largely by the Globe and Mail and Global News, citing unnamed national security sources or partially leaked documents. They were alleging the Chinese government interfered in federal elections in 2019 and 2021 to favor liberals winning over conservatives. Opposition parties pushed the government on an inquiry. After some resistance, it complied, producing many witnesses.
Could you please state your name for the record? Justin Trudeau.
To the Commission Council, Trudeau maintained there's a lot he didn't know, contradicting some news stories.
Reporting of an expressed preference by certain PRSC officials for a Liberal minority. Was that something of which you were aware?
No.
The Commission also heard from the heads of CSIS and the RCMP. Today, Hogg will release her first report. Conservative MP Larry Brock says he looks forward to it.
I've got some thoughts, but I want to wait until I have an appropriate opportunity to review it.
While Liberal Jennifer O'Connell, the parliamentary secretary to the Public Safety Minister, says they'll take Hogg's findings seriously.
We're going to review them.
This fall, Hogg is expected to focus on diaspora communities in more public hearings. Rafi Boudjikanian, CBC News, Ottawa.
Alberta wildfire officials say some much-needed rain has allowed crews to extinguish a number of blazes, including some that have been burning since last year. 43 wildfires are burning in the province, 3 of them being held, and none is out of control. This time last year, there were 100 wildfires burning throughout Alberta, roughly a third of them out of control. But Wildfire Alberta's Christy Tucker says a few days of cooler, wetter weather won't reverse the many months of drought some areas have seen.
It is still easy for some warm, dry, windy days to raise the wildfire danger level again. We'll be responding to conditions to introduce or adapt fire bans, restrictions, or advisories as appropriate.
With that in mind, residents are being urged to remain vigilant. A traffic stop in the Toronto area could get you into even bigger trouble now. The Ontario Provincial Police will be administering mandatory alcohol screening tests during every traffic stop in the GTA. Changes to the Federal Criminal Code give police across the country the power to do the same. Philip Lishanuk reports.
Too many folks are still making that selfish choice to drive impaired.
Steve Sullivan of Mothers Against Drunk Driving Canada says changes to the criminal code in 2018 gave police the power to demand a breathalyzer test, even if there's no evidence or suspicion that a driver is impaired. But so far, only a handful of police services across the country, in Saskatchewan, Quebec, and now the OPP, are doing it.
I think there was a little bit of a hesitation for some police service to see how the courts might interpret this. And so far, at every court case, that it's been upheld as constitutional.
Shakir Rahim of the Canadian Civil Liberties Association says they're ready to intervene in the right case.
We think this could be an issue that goes up to the Supreme Court of Canada to make an ultimate determination.
The CCLA says random breath testing is an unjustifiable violation of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Rahim says it's search and seizure without cause, an experience that can be humiliating and degrading and result in arbitrary detention.
It is going to disproportionately affect members of racialized communities who are already stopped by the police for unjustified reasons.
But police say impaired driving collisions and charges are at a 5-year high, and drivers pulled over for speeding or other offenses should prepare to be tested. Philip Lishanuk, CBC News, Toronto.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. If you're looking for the tools to talk about the day's big stories with the little people in your life, check out cbckidsnews.ca. I'm John Northcott. This is CBC News.
Good morning, Manitoba. Nice to be back with you on Information Radio. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or on YouTube. Thanks to Faith Fundal for filling in for the last couple days. We've got some light drizzle continuing in Winnipeg this morning, and it's cloudy. But Abby will talk about how it's going to taper off for us throughout today. This hour on the show, we're asking what issues have you had trying to build on your property? We're going to hear the story of a family that built an oversized garage on their property without a permit. And the city decided it's allowed to stay. We'll hear from a neighbor about how a neighbor feels about that decision coming up this hour. In addition, an Anishinaabe student is excited to be graduating from the University of Manitoba and to be part of a special powwow ceremony this weekend. We're going to hear her story. And right out the gate, after we hear news headlines, today is World Press Freedom Day. We're going to touch on that with the Fifth Estate that's celebrating 50 years. They have a special project, the CBC News Investigative Program does, that is, and we'll hear all about it. Right now, though, let's go to Heather Wells with our headlines.
Good morning. Well, the Winnipeg Fire Paramedic Service says it can't meet the city's budget target unless it cuts back on services when it's short-staffed. The department says in a new report the only way to hit a $3 million savings goal this year is if it cuts overtime, and that would mean reducing the number of fire trucks in service when there aren't enough firefighters on a shift. We'll hear more. And a judge is expected to decide today whether the trial of a Winnipeg man accused of killing 4 women will be heard by a jury. Lawyers for Jeremy Skibicki say 2 years of publicity around the case may have biased the jurors. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 7:30.
All right, thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Let's get into what's happening in the weather forecast, Abby.
Good morning. We're still stuck at 7 degrees with light rain in our city. So if you're heading out, don't forget your umbrella, the umbrella, because today's forecast calls for showers, which should be tapering off late this afternoon and leaving us with cloudy skies. We're expecting a high of 11 degrees in Winnipeg today. As we move into the night, the clouds are going to stick around, keeping things mainly cloudy, and the temperatures will dip down to a low of +3. So you might want to layer up. I know it's Friday night and a lot of people would want to spend some time out, so you might want to prepare for that. Brandon is at 6 degrees, seeing light rains. Thompson is currently at 0 chance of showers and rain later tonight. Churchill is misty at 1. Dauphin and Gimli both at 6 and 7 degrees with light rain, and the highs will be from between 8 and 12. Steinbach and Morris both sticking with 6 and 7, and showers possible. Thunderstorm later in the afternoon, and we'll be getting to a high of 12. Winnipeg, showers tapering off in the afternoon, and it's going to be cloudy.
All right, thanks, Abby.
You're welcome.
Let's get to the commute, Corey Funk.
Yeah, so far pretty straightforward commute out there. Haven't heard anything major going on. But if you're out there, you're walking, biking, driving, you see something going on, give me a call on that CBC commuter line. That number, 204-788-3093.
Well, as I mentioned, today is World Press Freedom Day, a day to remind people and governments around the world about the importance of journalism and a free press. In recognition of the value of journalism in this country, we're going to focus on the CBC News investigative program, The Fifth Estate, and a project that show is advancing. Now, The Fifth Estate is going to launch its 50th season next fall, and ahead of it, The Fifth is appealing to Canadians to share stories of public interest. Stories that are not getting proper attention as many communities have lost local news media outlets. To talk about it, Stephen D'Souza is with us live this morning. Stephen is a co-host with The Fifth Estate. Good morning.
Good morning, Marcy.
So what is The Fifth Project all about?
So as you mentioned, we really want to highlight stories that we feel may be getting overlooked because of the changing media landscape in Canada. If you think back to 1975, when the Fifth Estate was first launched, the media environment in the country looked a lot different. Almost every major community and many small ones had, one local newspaper, maybe 2. There were radio news outlets covering local events and healthy television stations. Of course, these days, the reality is much different. The media in Canada is facing pretty bleak times, and a lot of communities have lost their local news media. And even in cases where stations remain, there are only skeleton newsrooms. And so for readers, listeners, viewers, this means that there may not be a reporter at City Hall sitting through council or committee meetings. And so they may not take a close look at stories on service cuts or development projects or environmental or water issues. And it's really stark when you step back and put things in perspective. There's a group of academics in Ontario and BC running something called the Local News Project, and they've been keeping a track of the decline in local media. And they identified more than 400 community newspapers that have closed since 2008. And on the radio side, 40 stations that have closed, 7 that have decreased service. In television, 11 stations that have closed, 54 that have decreased service. And our big concern is that there are a lot of stories that are getting lost because newsrooms have either been eliminated or are severely understaffed. And these could be stories of fraud, corruption, wrongful convictions, the misuse of taxpayer funds. And, these are investigations that take a long time and a lot of resources. And that's something that the Fifth Estate has a lot of experience with. And so we want to know about these stories and we want to investigate them with you.
What specifically is are you at the Fifth Estate proposing? How would it work?
So we want people to get in touch with us to tell us about these stories. And, as I said, we've built up a lot of investigative experience. And what's interesting is a lot of the biggest stories we've done have begun with a tip from Canadians, somebody who picked up the phone or sent us an email or even wrote us a letter. And I'll give a couple of examples, even just from recent years. This past season, we did a story on hate groups operating in the dark web that are grooming young people for real-world violence. That started off with a tip that we received via email. An investigation into a missing woman from Newfoundland that led to the arrest of her husband, again, started with a tip. Even the decade-long investigation that we've done on former fashion mogul Peter Nygard, that also was generated from a tip. And sometimes it's interesting. Sometimes these tips don't always come from members of the public. Sometimes we get tips from within the CBC. So an episode I did last season on an alleged immigration scam in PEI came to us from a local PEI journalist who had been doing a few stories and knew that there was a lot more going on, but needed some help. And so we stepped in and ended up doing a story that covered multiple provinces and really peeled back the layers of what he had already started on. And so, we want Canadians to reach out with these important local stories, and we want to investigate it with them. And we recognize, though, of course, we can't investigate everything, but we do promise to look at everything that comes in. And if we can't take a look at it, we'll pass it on to our colleagues in CBC around the country. And Marcy, it's interesting. So far, we've already received close to 1,000 tips from people around the country, and it's a good reminder that people really care about their communities and want to demand transparency and accountability.
Tell us about the decision at the Fifth Estate about timing to open this up specifically. This targeted way. Why take this on now?
So as you mentioned, this is our 50th season coming up this fall, and so we really wanted to celebrate the legacy and the impact the show has had on public discourse in Canada. And so, a lot of the stories we've done have had an impact on Parliament Hill, on Main Street, everything from prompting public inquiries to getting laws changed. You think about the Airbus scandal with former Prime Minister Brian Mulroney getting handed envelopes of cash, a story that was uncovered by the Fifth Estate. Stephen Truscott, a former famous case of somebody being wrongfully convicted that was overturned after the Fifth Estate gave the story some prominence. In the past, the show has received an Academy Award for Best Documentary, an International Emmy, but we don't want to rest on our laurels. We really want to move into the next 50 years investigating stories that matter to Canadians. And democracy dies without good independent journalism, and so we want to highlight the importance of grassroots journalism in communities across the country, and especially in this time of social media where there's so many hot takes and opinions and quick bites. We really want to highlight the value and importance of real, in-depth investigative journalism and how important and crucial that is to a healthy democracy.
Before you leave us, how do people get in touch with you then?
Yeah, so if you have a story, you want to get in touch with us, go to the website, the Fifth Estate website, cbc.ca/fifth. We have a form on the website that you can fill out and submit your story idea that way. You can also email us, fifthtips@cbc.ca, fifth written out, fifthtips@cbc.ca. Or if you have something more confidential, we also have a secure drop page. So cbc.ca/secure drop. And reach out to us, and we'll do our best to look into whatever you send in.
All right. Have a great weekend, Stephen. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care.
Stephen D'Souza, co-host with the CBC's The Fifth Estate.
We carry a world of information in our pockets because we want to know. Breaking news that shapes our world. staying on top of stories around the globe and connected close to home. It's news you can trust, delivered when you want and where you want on Canada's News app. Now with CBC Radio 1, local and live. Download the CBC News app for free.
7:20 is the time right now. Light drizzle in Winnipeg, 7 degrees for this Friday. It is a high of 11 on May the 3rd. Thanks for joining us. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is CBC. Well, as you might have heard on World Report this morning, they're playing a little bit of Dua Lipa because they're promoting the fact that Dua Lipa's on Q with Tom Power today, right here on CBC Radio at 10 o'clock. Of course, Dua Lipa, one of the biggest pop stars in the world, as a multi-Grammy winner, one of a handful of artists to have multiple songs with more than 2 billion streams, and her new album, Radical Optimism, is one of the most anticipated music releases of the year. So you'll be able to hear a full interview with Dua Lipa on Q today with Tom Power. From that album, Radical Optimism, this is Training Season. The queen of the build, right? In a song. Training Season, that is a Dua Lipa. Dua Lipa's going to be on Q today with Tom Power. We're talking about the music, talking about also her history, her past. Today she'll talk about how she funnels her truth into her music and how growing up in Kosovo and being the child of immigrants, she says, shaped her art. So check out that exclusive Canadian exclusive interview on Q today with Tom Power on CBC. It is 7:25 a.m. You're on Information Radio on 89.3 FM, 990 a.m. on the app or YouTube on this Friday, May 3rd. Light drizzle out there, and it is 7 degrees. Well, let's get to morning sports, and Scott Regehr joins us now live. Good morning.
Hey, have you spoken with Tom Power before?
Me? No, I actually haven't.
Yeah, I've spoken with him a couple times. He's so chill and so engaged in conversation, as like genuinely. Not that should be a shock in our business, but you want to tell him everything you got. That's my observation of Tom Power. He's perfect for that show Q, talking to anybody about anything. If you get a chance, highly recommend a chat with Tom Power, although he'll extract everything he needs to from you.
Oh, should be a good show today. Yeah. Okay, let's talk about the Jets. What did the media extract from them yesterday following their first round exit? What are they saying?
Well, I mean, there's still a lot of shock and confusion, just like there is among the Jets fan base, I'm sure. Player after player, Marcy, kept echoing how much belief they had in how the team was constructed and playing. Here's defenseman Dylan DeMello.
Just still trying to process what happened. And I think that's okay. I think you got to let it kind of simmer a little bit, let the dust settle, and realize why we were so good in the regular season, why we were in the playoffs. I think if I had an answer for you so fast, we probably wouldn't be here. And not trying to be funny, but I am truly kind of puzzled why it didn't work, because I really thought we had a really good group.
This level of self-reflection, Marcy, really stands in contrast to last year's exit meetings, where a lot of players were more upset with how the head coach Rick Bowness called them out following that first-round loss to Vegas. All this does leave the question, though, what's coming up next? GM Kevin Cheveldayoff acknowledged the need for change, saying everybody needs to come back 10% better. One thing that probably will not change, the head coach, with players defending him and his systems, and Bowness himself saying how much he still loves the game. It does seem like it's just a matter of time, Marcy, until the team picks up the final year of Bowness's contract.
Oh, I'm jealous of Toronto this morning. Thanks to a certain Swede, the Leafs are still in it, breathing a sigh of relief. They forced a Game 7.
Yeah, and for a franchise that's boasted many Swedes, from Borje Salming to Mats Sundin, Marcy, this Swede had fans as excited as they've been in some time.
To Nylander, breakaway, game on his stick, scores! Willie Nylander makes it 2-0. We're going to Boston again. This time we're going to finish the job.
If you haven't had your coffee this morning, that might serve just the same purpose. Joe Bowen's very neutral call, Marcy, of William Nylander's breakaway goal that not only dusted off the Bruins last night, but sets up a deciding Game 7 tomorrow. Nylander, who missed the beginning of this series with migraines, was a headache himself for the Bruins last night, scored both Toronto goals. Back to the broadcaster, Joe Bowen, though. Earlier this week, and he's covered the Leafs for more than 4 decades, he called out home fans for being reactive rather than proactive in their support. Well, the Leafs faithful took that to heart. They were louder than they've been all season long. Here's Toronto coach Sheldon Keefe.
That crowd was tremendous tonight. I mean, that was so loud in there. My voice starting to go on me just for line changes and trying to communicate to the guys. I'm not sure how it feels up top, but down at ice level, there's a lot of stuff coming down on us, and you got to kind of override that to be able to communicate to the guys. And you're trying to stay calm and help the group stay calm, yet it's hard to do so.
Now the Leafs need to stay calm ahead of tomorrow's Game 7 back in Boston. History suggests they probably should not be calm. In 3 previous series versus the Bruins over the past decade, everyone went to a 7th game, and everyone saw Boston prevail. So we'll see. Pretty tough to jump on another Canadian team's bandwagon, I understand, but we'll see. Game 7 tomorrow from Boston.
I'm not going to ask our city to do anything.
No.
Do what you will, people. It's all up to you individually. And there was a much anticipated announcement yesterday ahead of the Paris Olympics, right?
Yeah, Team Refugee was announced, Marcy. This is the 3rd Summer Olympics now that a team of athletes coming from conflict zones and places where human rights are violated has been involved. Named as part of the squad yesterday was Toronto-based judoka Nigara Shaheen. This is her 2nd Team Refugee appearance at an Olympics. At the last ones in Tokyo, Shaheen competed while not wearing a headscarf, leading to a backlash against her family in Afghanistan.
I hope that my presence in this sport for this long period of time should be an ideal and should be an example for others to start accepting that women can be active in this field and women can be themselves. So people should start accepting that.
Shaheen among 36 athletes from 11 countries competing for Team Refugee. One of them hoping to be the first to win an Olympic medal for that team in Paris. And you can read much more about them on our website this morning.
All right, thank you a lot.
You bet.
That is Scott Reguer with CBC Sports. If you need us in traffic, 788-3093. It's been a pretty good Friday morning drive in the rain so far. Coming up after the news this weekend, there's a special graduation powwow at the University of Manitoba. We're going to hear from a student who's pretty excited to be part of it. Stay with us. Your CBC Winnipeg News is first.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg on a damp Friday morning. 7:30, we're at 7 degrees in downtown Winnipeg. Still some light drizzle, and these showers will end late this afternoon. A high today of 11. We're expecting warmer temperatures this weekend. A Winnipeg man who complained about his neighbor's oversized garage is not happy with the city's appeals committee. That committee fined a homeowner yesterday who built a 4,900-foot garage without getting a permit, but it's still allowing that unapproved structure to stay standing. Darren Van Winsberg lives next door to that property in the Wilkes South area of Charleswood.
It sets a very bad precedent for Charleswood and the whole city, because this is now what people can do. There's no need to pull a permit, just build it, and the city will give you a small fine at the end, and just pay your small fine, and you get away with it.
The planning consultant who represented the garage's owner says he was fined a few $1,000s. He says his client didn't realize he had to get a permit before building that garage. Winnipeg's Fire Paramedic Service says the only way it can meet the city's cost-cutting target is to take fire trucks off the streets. A new report from the department says cutting overtime is the only way it can hit that $3 million cut required by the city's latest budget. That means idling fire trucks if they're short-staffed. Councillor Evan Duncan, chair of the Community Services Committee, says they won't be taking firefighters off the street.
I don't know that $3 million is an achievable goal. However, we can continue to have this conversation and potentially look at ways of cost savings over the coming months and years in this budget.
Duncan says the savings in the Fire Paramedic Service could be found by reducing capital expenses. The report goes to the Community Services Committee next week. A judge is expected to decide today whether the trial of a Winnipeg man accused of killing 4 women will be heard by a jury. Lawyers for Jeremy Skibicki have asked his trial be heard by judge alone. The defense says 2 years of publicity around the case may have biased the jurors. Skibicki has pleaded not guilty to 4 counts of first-degree murder in the deaths of Rebecca Comtois, Morgan Harris, Mercedes Myron, and a 4th unidentified woman Indigenous leaders have named Buffalo Woman. Opening arguments are set to be heard on Wednesday. The first report from the public inquiry into foreign interference is being released today in Ottawa, with a final report coming at the end of the year. This is an update on what the inquiry's learned so far about foreign meddling in the last 2 federal elections. And with both sides considering major concessions, it is being suggested real progress is being made towards a ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas. Meanwhile, Turkey has suspended all trade with Israel over the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. There was about $7 billion in trade last year between Israel and Turkey. You can hear the latest national and international news coming up on World Report at 8. A library hub that refers users to social services has seen a surge in visits. A new report shows the community connection space in the Millennium Library referred nearly 5,900 people in the past 3 months. That is more than double the number from the previous 3 months. The report comes as funding for the space, though, is set to run out at the end of the year. Evan Duncan chairs the city's Community Services Committee.
I'm empathetic with the situation that's going on in downtown Winnipeg and throughout our city, is that a lot of people are in need right now, and that we need those social services, we need wraparound services, and we need the government to step up on a provincial level and fund those.
Community Connections has library staff and crisis workers who help people seeking information for services like housings and addiction support. Well, there has been no shortage of Manitoba representation at international cheerleading events as of late. Manitoba teams right now competing in Orlando. Melissa Skrabeck-Senecal is the president of Cheer Manitoba. She says the province is sending a higher number of teams to compete against the world's best than ever before.
Never qualified this many people for these big year-ending world competitions before. This is the best that Manitoba has ever sort of represented down there.
Scrabbick Senecal hopes the province can keep proving it can compete with teams from bigger cities. I'll be back with more news throughout the morning, but you can find the latest news updated throughout your morning at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Let's give a cheer for Abby Adeyemi, who is here with our regional forecast.
I know, not really fun in the new weather forecast this morning, as it's more of like rain across a board. Winnipeg is still at 7 degrees. We're seeing some light rain throughout the day. Expect that showers to gradually be tapering off as the afternoon period gets closer, leaving us with mostly cloudy skies, and then we'd see a high of around 11 degrees. Now, tonight the clouds will stick with us and temperatures will be dipping to around at 3 degrees, so it's going to be kind of cold tonight. Heading west to Brandon, it is 6 degrees, and we're seeing light rain. The showers are forecasted with amounts of ranging from 5 to 10 millimeters and a high of 10 degrees. Up in Thompson, it's 0 and cloudy. A chance of rain in the afternoon and a high of 7. Further north in Churchill, it is -1 and misty. Today's forecasts will see periods of light snow with fog patches dissipating this morning and a high of 0. Down in Dauphin, it's 6 degrees. We're seeing light rain and some showers expected throughout the day. Would get to a high of 8. For folks in Gimli, it is currently 7 degrees with light rain. Showers also in the forecast and a high of 12. Steinbach is at 6 with showers. There's a risk of thunderstorm this afternoon and a high of 12. And finally in Morris is at 6 degrees and cloudy. Expect showers with a risk of thunderstorm also this afternoon, and winds will be coming from the west later in the day. You'll get to a high of 12. But in Winnipeg, we're expecting few showers today, tapering off by the afternoon period, and we'll get to a high of 11. Tonight stays cloudy, dipping to 3.
All right. Thank you, Abby.
You're welcome.
Let's get into what's happening on the wet commute this morning. Corey?
Yes, wet commute, but overall been pretty dry on the commuter line so far. Only got one call from Dan on a bike, who just phoned to say that bike lanes are looking good, especially now that a lot of the gravel has been taken out of the bike lanes. So he's pretty happy about that. But other than that, if you see anything else going on, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. I'll let folks know what you're seeing. That number to call, 204-788-3093.
All right. Thanks very much,
Thank
Corey.
you.
23 minutes to 8 o'clock now. And I want to mention that CBC is looking to highlight leaders, success stories, and change makers of people who are under the age of 40 in our province. So if you know someone, and maybe it's you, who is giving back to Manitobans and making our province's future a little bit brighter, we want to hear from you. We're looking to highlight the top 10 people under 40 and over 18 who have a passion for Manitoba and are working to make a difference in all sorts of ways. These are the nominations for CBC Manitoba's Future 40 Award. So make a nomination. Don't overthink it. If you have someone in mind, please tell us about them. cbc.ca/future40mb. Nominations will be accepted until tonight at midnight. So we've been talking about this on air for the last couple of weeks. Today's the deadline. So to submit, please go to cbc.ca/future40. It could lead to some special coverage on CBC, really nice profiles, and then of course we get to highlight the important work that the nominees are doing in our community as well. So please nominate and consider nominating someone for Future 40. It is 21 minutes to 8 o'clock now, and speaking of success stories, next on the program, Taylor Galvin is very excited to be graduating this weekend. She and many other Indigenous students are going to be part of the 35th annual traditional graduation powwow over at the University of Manitoba. It happens on Saturday. It's a day-long celebration, and it includes an opening pipe ceremony. There's speeches to the grads. There's a big community feast in the afternoon. Taylor's a proud member of the Sturgeon clan from the Broken Head Ojibwe Nation, and she joins me now from her community via Zoom. Hi there.
Bonjour, Anine, Minolgagishap. Hello, good morning.
Massive congratulations to you.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited, but I'm getting a little nervous.
Why are you nervous?
Well, I don't know if it's like a secret or not, but I'm actually one of the ones who are giving a speech to address the grads tomorrow. Okay. And so I'm a little nervous, but I'm very excited.
Well, test out the message on us. What were you thinking about, at least as you were writing your speech and getting ready to share?
You know what? The first thing that came to my mind is they had mentioned that I could talk about my own story, but the first thing that came to my mind was it's not about just me, and it's not just about us. We do this for our communities, for our children, the elders, for the youth, for everybody else, you know. So we share these degrees with so many people aside from just art oneself.
Your own story, you went back as a mature student, is that right?
I did, yeah. I was a mature student. If 30 is mature, that's what they consider mature. But yes, I started a little later in the game.
And tell me a little bit about how you feel about how proud you are of yourself and why you wanted to get your degree.
Oh, wow. Thanks. I actually, before I went to school, I actually used to work in radio for a decade all across Canada. And, you know, I had set some goals for myself in that career path, which I, you know, so thankfully accomplished. And I wanted to do something to help protect our lands and our waters. And so I decided to go back to school and pursue an environmental degree and do this type of work. And it was a huge decision as a mature student, as you could imagine, you know, leaving full-time work and doing all that stuff and becoming a student and making a lot of different sacrifices. But it's been a roller coaster of a ride in my educational journey, from finding sobriety to, you know, finding who I really was as a teacher and as a leader. And it's been a long, hard road, but I'm so thankful that it's finally here.
As you graduate in environmental studies, how do you hope to use the education to help your community? Are you already thinking specifically about the differences that you're hoping to make?
Yeah, absolutely. And so though I'm graduating on Saturday, I start my master's degree on Monday. So it hasn't really ended. And now that I can actually pick a specific topic to do research on, it's around Indigenous protected and conserved areas. So IPCAs, one perfect example is the CO River watershed that's doing amazing work in northern Manitoba. And so it's really about using conservation and restoration and protecting biodiversity from an Indigenous lens and an Indigenous perspective.
During your academic career so far, do you have any moments that stick out specifically for you where either with colleagues in your educational or even in your personal life, people that really you want to thank as you think about graduation this weekend?
Yeah, I don't want to talk too much about that because I'm going to start crying, but there's so many people that have been so monumental in my journey, from all the staff at Miigwech, which is the Indigenous Student Center, Elder Carl Stone, who's also from Broken Head. He's been such a huge support. Vanessa Lilly, Carla Lowen, Denise Prue, there's so many, but like some memorable moments. I met my partner in my first year at university, and now we have a house and we live in Broken Head and dogs. So that was a huge moment. Other ones have been, I've done a lot of traveling as a student. I was in the Netherlands in last October. I just got back from New York. I've been to the UN twice as a student. And so those have all been very, very important to my path as well.
I was going to ask you about that trip to New York. So tell me a bit more about what you were doing there.
Yeah, I was there for the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, which is an annual gathering of Indigenous peoples from around the world where we come together to talk about things like Indigenous land rights. This year's theme was self-determination, and it was really that too had its ups and downs, but it was very beautiful because I managed to secure funding to take a youth from Broken Head with me. And so moving forward down this journey, I hope to be able to provide Indigenous youth with these opportunities to come with me now.
This weekend, I mentioned, is the traditional graduation powwow happening. Can you tell us a little bit about the powwow itself and some of the significant things that'll be happening during grad?
Absolutely. So this is a really big year. This is the 35th annual powwow. So it's just absolutely amazing. This powwow brings together all the Indigenous graduates from the University of Manitoba, and we get to honor and sit with them. And I get to walk in grand entry with them, in and of itself is such a privilege. And so we have, like you said, there's a pipe ceremony to start the day off, which is a way that we all connect spiritually. And then we have grand entry, and then we have a lot of different speeches, of course. And of course, there's a community feast, which is another thing that's very significant to Indigenous peoples around the world as well, specifically here in Turtle Island, where, you know, feasting is where we really come together and share stories and laughter, and we get to do all these different types of dances as well.
What message do you want to leave us with this morning? Specifically, do you want to give rather to other Indigenous students who are graduating this year like yourself, and what would you like to say to them this morning?
I would like to say, Kichimegwech, I'd like to thank them for taking a chance on themselves and for being these trailblazers for the next 7 generations behind them. Like I said, we do this for our communities, and if one person does this type of work and puts themselves out there, then it's such an inspiration to those that follow us. And I hope that my path has inspired and encouraged other Indigenous students to pursue degrees and understand that they too can help make change and break down those barriers that Western academia has had on us for so long.
Miigwech Taylor, good luck with your speech and enjoy your grad this weekend. Thank you so much for joining us this morning from Broken Head.
Thank you so much. It was so much fun.
We'll talk again. Take care.
Goodbye.
That's Taylor Galvin joining us via Zoom this morning. She's a member of the Sturgeon Clan from Broken Head, Ojibwe Nation. She will be taking part in speaking at the 35th Annual Traditional Graduation Powwow at the University of Manitoba on Saturday.
On the topics that matter, your voice should be heard.
I'm really concerned.
And I'm not really happy about that.
Radio Noon is where you can voice your take. I'm Janet Stewart. From 12:30 to 1 p.m., Radio Noon opens the phone lines on one important topic.
It just brings everyone together.
Radio Noon's call-in segment, 204-780-0893. We want to hear from you, weekdays on CBC.
7:46 a.m. is the time right now on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or YouTube. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Good to be back with you today. Thanks to Faith Fundell for filling in. Behind the glass, Brad Lilies, Corey Funk, and Abby Adiyami. It is a gray morning in Winnipeg. This rain is supposed to end late this afternoon, and then a cloudy day for the rest of it, and a high of 11 today in Winnipeg. Coming up on the program after 8, a close friend of a Winnipeg man who was killed in Toronto is now raising funds in his name with proceeds going to the Canadian Autism Foundation. We'll hear more about his story. That's after 8 o'clock on the show. And still ahead in this half hour, more on the story you might have heard in the news about a family that built an oversized garage in their property without a permit, but the city decided it's allowed to stay after the homeowner paid a fine. We're going to hear more about how the neighbor feels about that decision, and we're asking you about permits with the city. Have you ever gone to get one or been in a neighborhood where you've challenged one? What's your experience been with that? 788-3205 if you want to weigh in. Well, time for a bit of music now from Tracy Bone, who we've played before in the program. Of course, grew up on the Kisikowainen Ojibwe Nation in Manitoba. She's a multiple award-winning songwriter who puts the ups and downs of life into a lot of her music, including this tune. This is called Your Love Is Home.
For more weeks
From Kisikowanan, Ojibwe First Nation, Tracy Bone, and Your Love is Home on CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or YouTube. Good music for a Friday morning. 10 to 8 is the time right now on 89.3. It is 7 degrees in Winnipeg. Well, coming up next in the program, let's dig into this story that's in the news this morning about a Winnipeg man who built an oversized garage on his Liberty Street property in Charleswood, Wilkes South neighborhood. And one of his neighbors isn't happy. The man did not apply for a permit before it was built, but the city is still allowing it to stand, following a 3-1 vote from the city's appeal committee on Wednesday. The 4,900 square foot garage is 300 feet away from his neighbor, Darren Van Winsberg. Now, he told CBC's Bartley Kivas how he feels about the big red garage.
This has drastically reduced my property values. I have 30 windows in the back of my house. Look onto this, between the upstairs and the downstairs. There's a reason why people require permits for the city of Winnipeg. So this sets a very bad precedent, not only for this area, it sets a very bad precedent for Charleswood and the whole city, because this is now what people can do. There's no need to pull a permit, just build it, and the city will give you a small fine at the end, and just pay your small fine, and you get away with it.
How surprised were you to hear about that decision yesterday?
Completely shocked. Completely shocked. It's unheard of. This building is over 5 times the size of what is allowed, and almost twice the height of what's allowed.
Councillor Mays also said to me today that, in Glenwood we were doing lot splits, and we were building not to the specific planning specifications there. Nobody got mad then. Talking about other councillors. So what's the big deal? What do you make of his comments?
Liberty and Loudon are kind of like the Wellington Crescent of Charleswood here south of Wilkes. This is a very prestigious area. If somebody were to go and build something like this on a lot in Tuxedo or on Wellington Crescent on the river, there's some big properties out there in the 1.5 to 2 acre range. If somebody were to just go and put one of these up overnight, like what he's done basically, within a couple days, I'm certain that the city would make them take that down if it was on Wellington Crescent or in Tuxedo. I'm almost certain.
What did you say to your neighbor when he told you he was intending on building this thing?
I never thought it would be this big. Like, this is crazy how big it is. My backyard used to be like a park. Now I feel like I live in an industrial park.
That is Charleswood resident Darren Van Winsberg. Bartley also spoke with the area councillor Evan Duncan, whose ward this big garage was built in. When he asked Councillor Duncan about what the appeal committee decided to allow it to stand, he had this to say.
My concern is that, the message that residents are getting from this, especially in that area, is that don't worry about a permit. You can go through the processes of appeal and essentially get a slap on the hand.
So what was built here, or what was already constructed to your knowledge?
So we're looking at a structure, combined floor space of 4,900 square feet, approximately between 20 and 23 feet in height, as opposed to an accessory structure that would be 880 square feet and 13 feet in height.
And it's a garage. What's the concern in a large lot area like the South Wilkes neighborhood?
The garage itself isn't a huge concern, and I don't take issue with the resident personally here. The fact of the matter is that we have an appeal committee that has city councillors on it that made a decision that I disagree with as the area councillor. But as a city as a whole here, this is a message that's being sent to the city now that we have this massive structure being built. I don't care where it is in the city of Winnipeg. We have rules, we have permits, we have variances, all of which should be followed. And if not, this was an opportunity to send a message that you will have consequences, including potentially taking down that structure.
So was it your opinion that structure should be taken down?
Yes. So we have this structure now there that, it was approved. It's going to stay up. If I have been on that committee, I would have recommended that it be taken down.
That was Charleswood Tuxedo Westwood City Councillor Evan Duncan. Now, Bartley also spoke to John Winthrop, who's the professional planner who's representing the family that built the garage.
This property is the size of a CFL football field, and we're putting a barn on it essentially. In that entire area, there is a large number of structures, such as for horses, rings, etc., where people keep even livestock. There is a number of large detached structures out in this area of the city.
Wouldn't you need a building permit to go and do that, though? Like, never mind, not a rezoning or a conditional use, but wouldn't you regularly just need a building permit before you constructed such a thing?
You need variances before you can get a permit issued. So stamped, sealed drawings were provided to the City of Winnipeg, who flagged it and said you need variances, and that's what the hearing was about yesterday.
And is the building already constructed?
The building's up on the property.
So why did they build before getting the stamps and the variance?
Many Winnipeggers are unaware that you actually need to get building permits and development permits for garages and structures. A lot of work happens in the City of Winnipeg, then retroactively they find out they need permits. A lot of my work is dealing with that, where people who are just not informed or up to what is required to get either a building permit or a development permit.
Well, the area councillors expressed skepticism that your client was unaware. What do you make of that?
Unfortunately, there's a number of other people who have other items also on their property, including our neighbor next door, without permits. So it seems to be common in that part of the City of Winnipeg, and it's common across Winnipeg.
All right. So what did you make of the decision made by the committee?
That was an excellent decision. This committee listened to everyone. We had over 87 people sign letters of support. They heard people who were in support of it. They heard people in opposition. We walked them through a presentation to show them the nature of the area, that my client's land is the size of a CFL football field. The neighboring property is the size of 6 CFL football fields and is over 300 feet away.
So that's planner John Winthrop speaking with CBC's Bartley Kivas. We're wondering what your take is on this story, because of course there's only one Winnipeg and rules for all of Winnipeg and all of our neighborhoods. So while different neighborhoods have smaller lots and bigger lots, the rules are supposed to apply in the same way, and the permitting process is supposed to apply in the same way as well. However, should exceptions be made? Should they not? How does all of this sit with you as a Winnipegger? And specifically, what issues have you had trying to get permits on your property with the city? Let us know what this looks like from your view from your neighborhood at 788-3205, 788-3205. Or after the fact, have you ever been stuck with a bill for something that was not permitted on a property that you bought, and then you tried to expand something in the future? Let us know what your issues have been with permitting. 788-3205. You can read more about the story online. Right now, Heather Wells is in with other news and headlines.
Good morning. Well, Winnipeg's Fire Paramedic Service says the only way it can meet the city's cost-cutting target is taking fire trucks off the streets. A new report from the Fire Paramedic Service says cutting overtime is the only way it can hit the $3 million cut required by the city's latest budget. And that means if there aren't the staff on hand, the fire trucks will be idled in those times of short staffing. An advocate says a surge in referrals from a social services hub at the Millennium Library shows the need for the space. A new report shows referrals from Community Connections more than doubled in the last 3 months compared to the previous 3 months. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 8:30.
All right, thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Really wet outside. Portage Avenue's drenched. Although the rain is not coming down heavily, it's just steady. So that drizzle continues, 7 degrees and a high of 11 degrees. Those showers in Winnipeg should end this afternoon and then just cloudy for overnight. And it should clear tomorrow morning. On the commute this morning, besides being wet, we don't have anything major to report. If we're missing something, please call the commute line at 788-3093. Still ahead, a close friend of a Winnipeg man who was killed in Toronto is now raising funds in his name. Proceeds go to the Canadian Autism Foundation, and we'll hear why when we hear his story. That's coming up after 8. Stay with us. You're on CBC 89.3.
With Tom Power. Dua Lipa is one of the world's great pop stars. In a Canadian exclusive, we met up in New York City to talk about how being the child of refugees shapes her art, why pop music doesn't get the respect it deserves, and how to turn a bad date into a great song.
I feel good and I want to grasp that energy.
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
Grandparents and an infant were among those killed after a police chase in Ontario this week that sent a van going the wrong way down a busy highway. We'll look at the rules and risks around police chases coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm John Northcott. We begin in Ottawa. The public inquiry into foreign election meddling releases its first report today. This phase specifically looks at interference in the last two federal elections. It's based on 2 weeks of testimony from national security advisors and political parties. Janice McGregor has been following all of it. She is in our parliamentary bureau. Janice, what are the key points you're watching for today?
John, if there's one key takeaway here, it's that intelligence assessments are subjective. It is not evidence, as the head of CSIS made clear to us. So when Commissioner Marie-Josée Ugg weighs in on what she's seen here today, and remember, she's had access to classified information that the rest of us couldn't see, will she land in the same place as Special Rapporteur David Johnston did and conclude that the attempts by foreign actors to meddle in the last two elections weren't actually as threatening as some media reports portrayed? Or will she agree with what opposition politicians and diaspora groups have argued, that their concerns about interference weren't taken seriously enough by intelligence agencies, and the threshold that senior public servants set for sounding the alarm was way too high, should have taken local riding level meddling more seriously and not required definitive proof before intervening?
Janice, this is one of 3 reports on foreign interference to be released. The government has seen them all, so what's the next move?
Yeah, that's right. The Special Committee of Parliamentarians that review national security, as well as the Intelligence Review Agency, have all weighed in on foreign interference threats. Commissioner Ugg isn't required to make recommendations at this stage, but earlier this week, Public Safety Minister Dominic LeBlanc suggested the government won't wait now for her final report at the end of the year before it makes long-awaited changes to the CSIS Act, for example.
I'm confident that the Foreign Influence Registry will be part of a broader effort to strengthen legislation. I know it's very exciting. It's coming soon.
Another election, though, with more foreign meddling threats potentially, could be coming soon too, which gives today a sense of urgency.
Janice McGregor in Ottawa. Thanks, Janice.
You're welcome.
Campus demonstrations in support of Palestinians in Gaza are gaining momentum in Canada. Hundreds of people set up tents on the main lawn at the University of Toronto. The demonstrators were originally warned they would have to leave by 10 p.m. last night, but just before that deadline, university officials issued a statement telling protesters they could stay for now as long as their activities remain peaceful. Similar protests have sprung up at many other schools, among them Montreal's McGill University, the University of Ottawa, and UBC in Vancouver. Demonstrators are demanding the universities pull their endowment funds out of any investments that benefit Israel. In the U.S., more than 2,000 people have now been arrested across dozens of college campuses in recent weeks, and pro-Palestinian demonstrators are remaining defiant. Police used force to remove the encampment at UCLA early yesterday. University officials say the campus will remain closed except for some limited operations. Lindsay Duncombe has more from Los Angeles.
Students at UCLA will take classes virtually today, and those who do come to campus can expect to see police. Officers remain to prevent pro-Palestinian protesters from returning and setting up a new encampment. That's happened on other campuses. And the arrests do seem to have strengthened some protesters' resolve to keep fighting. One university senior spoke to reporters while she was in custody.
It's not about me, it's about everybody. You know, if I'm free, then what does that mean if my brothers and sisters in Palestine aren't free? So we need to resist, and we need to keep protesting, and that's the only way change will be made.
Some are glad to see the barricades gone. Jeff Winnico lives nearby. He's a retired judge and Jewish.
I can understand and appreciate how hostile an environment it is for the Jewish students on campus. It's a generation that could understand microaggression, but for a Jewish student, there are some signs that they had on here in Arabic calling for the burning of Tel Aviv. It doesn't make the students feel comfortable.
In a statement, UCLA's chancellor defended the decision to clear the encampment, saying it led to unsafe conditions on campus. He said the community is in great pain. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Los Angeles.
Meanwhile, Turkey has suspended all of its trade with Israel over the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. The trade ministry in Ankara says imports and exports between the two countries will resume only when Israel allows an uninterrupted and sufficient flow of aid to Gaza. In response, Israel's foreign minister is accusing Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan of, quote, acting like a dictator. Last year, the trade between Israel and Turkey amounted to some $7 billion. Secret recordings and Hollywood scandals dominated the latest testimony at Donald Trump's hush money trial. The former president is facing dozens of charges over a $130,000 payment to porn star Stormy Daniels. The CBC's Richard Madden is following the proceedings. Richard, it got a little tense in court on Thursday. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, it started when Trump's defense lawyers cross-examined a lawyer named Keith Davidson. Now, he negotiated that infamous hush money deal with former adult film star Stormy Daniels, who allegedly threatened to go public with stories of an affair with Trump before the 2016 election. Now, the defense tried to cast him as a sleazy Hollywood profiteer who tried to shake down celebrities for money, including Trump, Charlie Sheen, Hulk Hogan, and Lindsay Lohan. Now, Davidson denied accusations of extortion, saying he dealt solely with Trump's former lawyer and fixer, Michael Cohen, to broker those payments to Stormy Daniels. Now, Trump's defense team is trying to discredit Davidson's credibility and portray Michael Cohen as a disgruntled former employee. Now, the former president's accused of falsifying documents to disguise those payments, and Cohen has since been criticizing Trump online. Outside the courtroom, though, Trump complained he can't defend himself against Cohen, blaming the judge's gag order against him.
I'm not allowed to talk. There's never been any abuse like this before. This conflicted judge ought to get out of this case. He gives us nothing. It's such a rigged court.
Trump has called Cohen a liar, which violates the gag order. Prosecutors are looking for more fines against him.
So, Richard, what are you watching for next?
Yeah, well, court resumes later today, and the judge could also rule on whether Trump violated that gag order again for lashing out against a witness. But prosecutors are not yet asking to jail Trump, citing it would slow down the trial.
CBC's Richard Madden in Washington. Thanks, Richard.
Thanks.
Canada's top military commander says he's getting mixed messages from his civilian bosses in Ottawa, and it has to do with military funding. General Wayne Eyre held a remote town hall with the rank and file last week, and now CBC News has obtained a recording of that meeting. CBC's Murray Brewster has more.
We're being asked to suck and blow at the same time.
A very blunt assessment from General Wayne Eyre, the country's top military commander. Last fall, the Federal Treasury Board mandated each department make internal cuts. $810 million last year and $850 million this year at defense alone. Both the new defense policy and the recent federal budget promise increased defense spending, $8.1 billion in the coming years, a lot of it aimed at future years. Confused? You're not alone.
We have more funding in the future. This year on the operations and maintenance side, we are facing some challenges. And you talk about confusion. I don't have complete clarity yet either.
It is Eyre's reference to operations and maintenance funding that stands out. The recent federal budget does earmark significant funds for maintaining old equipment, but precisely how that squares with the savings exercise is vexing finance staff. Defense Minister Bill Blair has repeatedly said internal reallocation will not affect readiness of the forces, but acknowledge getting money for defense is an uphill battle.
Trying to go to cabinet or even to Canadians and tell them that we had to do this because we had to meet this magical threshold at 2% for the NATO commitment. And don't get me wrong, it's important. But it was really hard to convince people that that was a worthy goal.
The Defense Department hopes to have its budget sorted out sometime early this month. Murray Brewster, CBC News, Ottawa.
And finally,
don't need to rush. We got time in our cups. Yeah, it's just
congratulations to Neon Dreams for taking home the Album of the Year accolade at this year's East Coast Music Awards. The Halifax alt-pop duo came out on top for their release, Love Child Baby Dolphin. But it was also a big night for PEI's The East Pointers, who won Group Recording of the Year for their EP, Safe in Sound, and for singer-songwriter Jen Grant, who was awarded Songwriter of the Year. This year's ceremony took place in Charlottetown. And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm John Northcott. This is CBC News.
A wet Friday morning here in Winnipeg. Thanks for joining us on Information Radio. You're on 89.3 FM, 990 AM, or on the app or YouTube. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thanks for being here. This is CBC, and it is in Winnipeg. We've been around 7 degrees. We'll update that in a moment with Abby and see what the rest of the day is going to bring when it comes to the rain. This half hour on the show, a close friend of a Winnipeg man who was killed in Toronto is now raising funds in his name, with proceeds going to the Canadian Autism Foundation. We're going to hear his story coming up this half hour. Also, we're going to build on a story that's been in the news about a big garage that was built without a permit, and the city just fined the person that put it up. You're calling us. We're going to hear some calls about that, about your stories, about going through the permitting process for things on your own properties and what that was like. So some reaction to the story with your stories. Stay with us. Right now, though, let's go to Heather Wells for more details in the news. Good morning.
Good morning. Yes, and on that permitting story, a Winnipeg man who complained about his neighbor's oversized garage is not happy with the city's appeals committee. The committee yesterday fined the homeowner who built a 4,900-foot garage without getting a permit, but it's still allowing the unapproved structure to stay standing. Darren Van Winsberg lives next door to the property in the Wilkes South area of Charleswood. He says this sets a bad precedent that you can skirt the law, pay a fine, and get away with it. A judge is expected to decide today whether the trial of a Winnipeg man accused of killing 4 women will be heard by a jury. Lawyers for Jeremy Skibicki say 2 years of publicity around the case may have biased the jurors. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 8:30.
All right, thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Let's get into what's going on in the weather forecast. Abby?
Good morning, Marcy. The mercury has not moved much for the city of Winnipeg. In fact, for the southern part of the province, nothing has changed except for Churchill seeing freezing rain at the moment. Winnipeg is currently at 7 degrees. We've got light drizzle coming down. We're looking at showers that will be tapering off as the day progresses, giving way for cloudy skies. The high for today will reach around 11 degrees, and tonight will be mainly cloudy. It might be a good night to just, cozy up indoors with a hot cup of cocoa if you're not the type that will be out and about with your favorite movie. And if we look at tomorrow, we've got some good news. The clouds are going to be part of it. Then we're going to see some clearing skies, and temperatures will climb to a high of 13. Currently, Brandon is seeing some showers at a high of 10. Thompson seeing light rain, will head to 7. Churchill freezing rain, that's the condition right now. And then light snow expected later. We'll see a high of 0. Dauphin and Gimli both seeing light rains at the moment, and it's going to be around, high will be around 8 and 12. And for Steinbach and Morris, showers with possible thunderstorms. That's what's on the list for you today. You'll get a high of 12. In summary, we just have a high for today reaching 11. Showers will gradually be coming to an end and giving way for cloudy conditions for tonight in Winnipeg.
All right, thanks, Abby.
You're welcome.
The commute has been wet but been uneventful otherwise, so give us a call if you need. 788-3093. Well, up first this half hour, tragedy struck last August when a Winnipeg businessman died after he was fatally assaulted in a bar while visiting Toronto. 38-year-old Brett Sheffield was the founder of Next Gen Drainage Solutions based in Pilot Mount. He had a large circle of friends in the city that rallied behind his fiancée and her children following his death. Sheffield is being remembered for his generosity, who always paid it forward. Caden Unger wanted to pay tribute to his friend by doing something kind, and so he came up with a special design, and he put them on tees and hoodies, and the funds from the sales of the clothing I'm talking about will go directly to the Canadian Autism Foundation. Good morning, Caden.
Good morning.
So how have you been coping since you found out about Brett's, sudden death on this trip?
It was kind of very sudden, and I don't know, the year that I've had, or the past year, it has been very up and down. Like, I lost my grandpa too last year, so just kind of another thing to add to the grief. I don't know, I was coping very unhealthy for a little bit, but I don't know, just the way that Brett lived his life and what he would do for other people kind of helped me get through everything and just push forward. And there's a lot of lows, but I I think now that there's starting to be a little bit more highs coming out of it.
While you're speaking to, Manitoba this morning, why don't you talk about a little bit about how Brett did live his life? What was your relationship like with him? What was he like?
So I had met him when he started dating one of my friends, and so the way he lived his life was just a very pay-it-forward kind of mentality. If he saw some guys in a restaurant in work gear and there was like a hot day out, he would just go up and pay for their bills. And it wasn't even for me when he would buy things or like take me out. It was the time that he would spend with me. I would be having a bad day sometimes, and he would just be like, "Be ready, 10 minutes. I'm picking you up. We're going to try like steak." Or so that was just the mentality that he had. There's people that I talked to that have known him for 15 minutes, and like that impact that he made, it just stuck with them. So that's kind of the way I saw him live his life, and just the amount of people that he had reached out to, you can definitely feel it, especially dealing with the loss.
Why did you choose the Canadian National Autism Foundation as the organization to support in his name?
Well, one of the reasons why is his stepdaughter has autism, and so I wanted to pick an organization that did kind of fit with the family. And when I did a lot of research, I'll be honest, I didn't do like a lot of research, but I had reached out to them, and they're just a good charity. They were emailing back and forth with me, and like I could tell that there's a good heart behind what they did, and they were very chill and compliant with like, oh yeah, like we'll send you a logo, you can put it on the sleeve of the tee, because I didn't want to just like have the money go there and not have them have any representation on the tee. So
what does it look like on the t-shirt? What does it say, and what does it look like on the tees and hoodies?
So the inspiration behind everything was Brett had this tattoo that said "Freestyle Lifestyle," and pretty sure it was supposed to say "Freestyle Lifestyle," but a little bit of a spelling mistake. But I feel like that's very on brand for Brett, because he was one of those guys that was just a million miles an hour, and like just how he got everything done in a day was very surprising to me. But his mind was always going. So I picked the tattoo that he had and just kept the misspelled lettering, and then I had picked a logo and or just like a little design for the middle, and I had just decided to get a tattoo of it, like kind of that on myself. But then after I got the tattoo, I was like, well, this design kind of like would work on a T-shirt, and then I'm like,
what's the picture on it?
So it's got freestyle on top and then lifestyle on the bottom, and he got the tattoo in Australia, so I picked like a little skull with a little surfboard on it and stuff, so kind of fits with like hang loose kind of vibe of freestyle lifestyle. So I thought it was catchy and like visually appealing. So
and represents him. What does his fiance think of the fundraiser? How are you guys doing so far with your efforts?
I'm trying to drum up a little bit more sales. I know that there has been a lot of people that have spoken for stuff, and we're just trying to ramp up the sales for the last couple of days. I'm not a marketing genius. I work construction, and I'm away for like 3 weeks out of the month. So, I just have the link right now in my bio on my Instagram.
So is that where people should go? Are you sharing that publicly, Caden?
Yeah, I'm sharing that publicly. When I had first brought up the idea and posted it on Instagram, I got quite a bit of traction just with like all the amount of yeses.
Can you tell us what the link is on Instagram if people want to help out?
Yeah, my Instagram is Cade, CADE _diesel. Exactly how it sounds.
Okay.
And that's where the link is. I've encouraged people to copy it and paste it on their and share it in stories and stuff. I think the next time I do this, I want to do this kind of thing annually under the Freestyle Lifestyle brand and get a local Winnipeg artist to design something original.
So you're going to try to build it in the years ahead, maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so do an annual thing where I do this. So the next time I'm going to probably get a website and a little bit more...
little more organized. Tell you what.
A little more organized, yeah.
Listen, we'll stick with this time for now. We'll pass along that Instagram address. I know it's very sensitive times for you guys. Thank you so much for remembering your friend today on CBC. And thank you so much for sharing the story of what you're doing. Really appreciate talking with you.
And thank you for having me on. It's been awesome.
Take care.
Yeah, you too. Thanks.
Cade Unger is selling specially designed freestyle lifestyle t-shirts and hoodies. Yep, it's intentional, freestyle, not freestyle. All the proceeds from the clothing does go directly to the Canadian Autism Foundation, and it is Cade _diesel if you want to find the link to support.
Narrative, lyric, heroic, romantic, verse, or prose. The 2024 CBC Poetry Prize is on. Send in your best unpublished poem or poetry collection. Up for grabs, cash prizes from the Canada Council for the Arts, a 2-week writing residency at the Banff Centre for Arts and Creativity, and your work published on CBC Books. Contest closes June 1st. For rules and more, go to cbcbooks.ca.
Well, we asked you for a reaction this morning to a story that we've been covering both in the news and on the show about a family that built a big garage on their city property without a permit. And the city said it's okay, it can still stand, and gave the family a fine. One neighbor is not happy about that. The area councillor says they feel like they don't. The area councillor spoke with CBC and said that they believe that probably the property garage should have been taken down just because zoning rules are in place for a reason, permitting rules rather. So we're getting reaction to this on our listener line. Here's some of the calls that came in.
Hi, I'm Alexander Blascher calling. This is absolutely a case of rules for the rich and rules for the rest of us. They don't need to follow that. There's a separate playing field for them. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Stacy. I have a 50 by 120 lot in the Fort Garry neighborhood. And we were getting a permit. We had requested a permit inspector to come onto our property before getting some electrical work done. We were getting our electricity upgraded. It was really old, from the 1950s or 60s. And we were getting it upgraded to improve our amperage. And when the inspector was on our property approving what was going to be happening with the electrical, they noticed we had a 2 to 3 foot high temporary summer pool put up for our kids. It didn't have a ladder. You literally step into this pool, and they said, "Oh, we're going to flag this, and you need to get a permit for this pool." And I was just flabbergasted. We weren't there. Our contractor was there when the permit inspector was there, but it was months and months of back and forth with the lovely City of Winnipeg staff, who are not inspectors, but you can never get a hold of an inspector. So I never could get it straight, exactly, online website. The website is really poorly organized for permits, and it was just, I had to take days off work. It was a bit ridiculous to finally get to talk to someone who was an inspector, and we had to get a permit for this pool, which basically we got the permit in October, a month after we took it down. It was really eye-opening. There's not enough inspectors. They do a really great job, but they have just an overwhelming amount of work to do. So, the City of Winnipeg just needs some support with its staffing. Great people, but just really overworked, and their workload is ridiculous. So it just took a really long time for us to make that happen. So permits, not always a good time, even when you try to get them.
Do you have a story to share? 788-3205.
If you said, hey, let's try again, I would say yes with no hesitation. If you said let's be more than friends, I would say yes with no hesitation. You could break my heart and I'll let you back in. 'Cause I'm a stupid, dumb, I hate your guts, is what I wish I could say, but it's not. The way I feel about you, I care so much. Is it pathetic? I still see a future with you and me. If you said, hey, let's try again, I would say yes with no hesitation. If you said, let's be more than friends, I would say yes with no hesitation. You could break my heart and I'll let you back in. 'Cause I'm a stupid, dumb, I wish I could be the type of girl to ignore your texts. But every day since I've been holding on to the possibility of reinstating you and me. If you said, hey, let's try again, I would say yes with no hesitation. If you said, let's be more than friends, I would say yes with no hesitation. You could break my heart and I'll let you back in. 'Cause I'm a stupid, dumb fool for the people who like me, the people who like me but don't love me. I'm a fool for the people who like me, the people who like me but don't love me. I'm a fool for the people who like me, the people who like me but don't love me. I'm a fool for the people who like me, the people who like me but don't love me.
I've got some Tegan and Sarah vibes for me, but that is actually Moira and Claire. The tune's called No Hesitation, and they're from Nova Scotia, if you want to get them on your listening app. It is 27 minutes after 8 o'clock, and Janet Stewart is in to talk about what's coming up on the call-in conversation.
Happy Friday, Marcy. Nice to have you back.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming to my party.
That might be my medicated answer this morning.
Well, we're all fighting like this cold or whatever's
Right?
going around, and I know you've...
Well, you know what? It's seasonal, and you actually have a seasonal call-in today.
We do. We're going to talk lawn care. It's the time of year that people are wondering about seeding. Maybe you've got a problem that you're facing with your lawn. So we've got the head gardener from a garden center in Steinbach, Erna Wiebe, joining us to talk about lawn care and how to do it organically, how to do it however you want to. What problems are you facing? Do you have any concerns about the way other people do their lawns? Is there anything you'd like to do differently? Erna knows a lot of stuff, and she's going to be our guest today on the call-in. If you have questions, you want to reach us before the call-in conversation, which starts at 12:30 today, you can always call the listener line. The number is 204-788-3797. And I have a favorite listener line, Marcy, that I've actually been hanging on to since last week because I wanted to share it with you. I think you're going to love it. It was written. It's from a listener named Tara, who is, she was driving to work from the Interlake, and the call got knocked off. So she called back, and here's what she had to say.
I was continuing to drive, and I pulled over because I saw someone mowing their lawn, and I realized that one of the signs of spring is a critical decision that anybody who identifies as a woman, and indeed some that identify as men, have to face, is whether or not to shave our legs. And I think that also relates to the idea of mowing. So a sign of spring is the existential crisis of to mow or not to mow, to shave or not to shave. And I think both should be left natural. We have enough things to stress about. Why add these to the mix?
Isn't that great? Made me laugh too. That is such a good comment, Tara. Thank you so much for listening. And if you've got a comment, any sort of comment, we want to hear from you. 204-788-3797.
So again, the calling conversation, should you shave your legs or not? That's what it's all about.
Or lawn care. Your choice.
Thank you, Janet.
Thank you.
Janet Stewart with Radio Noon. Your CBC Winnipeg News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, we've had some light showers. That's going to continue through the day, ending late this afternoon. A high of 11. Right now, we're still stuck at 7. A Winnipeg man who complained about his neighbor's oversized garage is not happy with the city's appeals committee. That committee fined the man yesterday, the homeowner who built a 4,900-foot garage without getting a permit. But it is allowing the unapproved structure to stay standing. Darren Van Winsberg lives next door to the property in the Wilkes South area of Charleswood.
It sets a very bad precedent for Charleswood and the whole city, because this is now what people can do. There's no need to pull a permit, just build it, and the city will give you a small fine at the end, and just pay your small fine, and you get away with it.
The planning consultant who represented the garage's owner says he was fined a few $1,000s. He says his client didn't realize he had to get a permit before building the garage. The Winnipeg Fire Paramedic Service says it can't meet a city budget target unless it cuts back on services when it's short-staffed. The department says in a new report the only way to hit a $3 million savings goal for the year is to cut overtime. That would mean reducing the number of fire trucks in service when there aren't enough firefighters on shift. Councillor Evan Duncan thinks they may not hit the cost-cutting target.
We're not taking firefighters off the streets of Winnipeg. That is not the goal here. This was an ask in the budget process. Obviously, there needs to be more homework done on how we can find those monies, because it can't come from the front line.
The Winnipeg Fire Paramedic Service says shortages of more than 16 staff would still require overtime to avoid safety issues. The report will go to a city committee next week. A judge is expected to decide today whether the trial of a Winnipeg man accused of killing 4 women will be heard by a jury. Lawyers for Jeremy Skibicki have asked his trial be heard by a judge alone. The defense says 2 years of publicity around the case may have biased the jurors. Skibicki has pleaded not guilty to 4 counts of first-degree murder in the deaths of Rebecca Contois, Morgan Harris, Mercedes Myron, and a 4th unidentified woman Indigenous leaders have named Buffalo Woman. Opening arguments in the case are set to be heard next Wednesday. An advocate says a surge in referrals from a social services hub at Millennium Library shows the need for that space. A new report shows referrals from Community Connections more than doubled in the last 3 months compared to the previous months. Funding for the hub is set to run out at the end of the year. Joe Kernow of the group Millennium for All says that would be a huge mistake.
We know that the library is home to a lot of different users with different needs, and that Community Connections provides library services designed by library professionals to provide library resources. And so why this would be outside the scope of what the city should fund is a mystery to me.
Councillor Evan Duncan, the chair of that Community Services Committee, says the province should step in and fund the Community Connections space. Well, Manitobans are having a blast competing at an international cheerleading event in Orlando. 15-year-old Gabby Boily is part of the Central Cheer team. She says even though the team didn't win their event, the group came a long way.
When we first had our first practice, not everyone knew each other. Some were very new to level 3. Not many knew the skills. So we all really just came together as a team and pushed our absolute hardest. So being here today with a lot of girls who haven't even competed at this level is very surreal.
The president of Cheer Manitoba says this is the biggest team Manitoba has ever sent to this event. You can find more on all these stories. All you have to do is head to our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba. You can also check out the CBC News app.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Thanks to Heather, Megan Ketchison, and Aaron Broman in our news department this morning. Thanks to our team of associate producers that work on all of our local programs. They are Corey Funk, Abby Adeyemi, Chloe Friesen, Issa Kickson, Kalkadan Mulugeta, Sierra Sanders, Chidi Akuma, Jim Agapito, Dylan Longhurst, Daniel Friesen, and Bruce Layden. Our community reporter in unit is Shanley Vidal. Our hosts in unit, Nadia Kidwai, Faith Fundell, and Janet Stewart. Producer in unit, Wendy Parker, and the YouTube producer is Brad Lillies. Nellie Gonzalez is a show producer in Current Affairs, and Leif Larson is a senior producer of audio at CBC Manitoba. All right, Corey Funk, are we winning with the quietest morning ever?
It's very well up there. I have zero complaints about the road so far this morning, so I'll take it. But all around good day.
Quiet times on the commute. And Abby, the rain's
I'll tell you the temperatures.
quiet?
It's more like light rain. Temperatures ranging from 0 in Churchill all the way to 12 in Morrison Steinbach. They thunderstorm for that part of the city of the province also. But warmer weekends ahead, and of course, I'll get to say this. May the 4th be with you.
Oh, yeah, right? yeah, that's this weekend for sure. 8:35 the time right now. Remember, the Currents coming up next on CBC here. Also, around town, the Winnipeg Comedy Festival is on. So exciting. And there's still hockey on if you flip teams. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thanks for joining us this morning. Thanks to Faith Fundell for filling in for me the last couple of days. Take care, be well, and we'll talk to you again on Monday right here on CBC's Information Radio.